Played there not too long.
Did you play in the Rotary Club tournament? Is that why you were there?
It was something else. It was another tournament. Rotary.
San Marcos Rotary just had a big tournament there.
Okay.
Yeah.
They do. Well, I think they do.
It's dying.
Yeah, they do.
Thank you.
They do. Well, they've got a great banquet facility. And I can remember when the golf shop where it is now used to be this dilapidated, crumbling, run down old building where they had a little bit of golf merchandise and a snack bar, and it was kind of smell funny in there, and it was weird, and they've just tuned that baby up and turned it into uptown,
It's very
real uptown. And now they've got that golf academy out there by the range. Yeah, they got a full-blown golf academy, a tenant, and they put up some temporary buildings out there, and that's where they have classrooms, and then they have a whole.
like youth, mostly youth golfers.
No, you get a lot of retired military that want to get into the golf industry. Get a lot of different stuff in golf academies, and yeah, some kids. You got some kids that flunked out of college and then flunked out of junior college and then flunked out of community college, and finally mom and daddy said you're either going to go work at a service station or one more try, I'll let you go to golf college, and that's what you get. So
Oh, it's more school for golf.
it's time to roll up here. So 1 o'clock, we're going to call this meeting to order, and as always, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Now, Therese, can we just do this verbally, or do you have to do it?
Either way.
Either way, I'll do it. Okay. So roll call. Flint Nelson here. Steve McKesson, Vice Chair.
I'm here.
Robert Marnett.
Present.
Carrie Dale.
Here.
Mig Gaska. You hear Mig?
No, sir, he's not.
Okay. And we have alternate Rick Aragon here. Okay, so I believe we have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need 3 to make a quorum, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a quorum. Please stay. But we do not need to seat you. Okay. Item 5, additions, deletions, and amendments to the agenda. Start with the staff. Do you have any additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda?
We do have one addition,
Okay.
potential addition. And this came from the previous board meeting. We were discussing, and I'll try not, well, I'm going to spoil my general manager comments, but we've completed all of the requirements for detachment. And so we filed everything on our end last Wednesday, including the initial exit fee payment and notification that we are no longer in need of the Southern connections. And we'll be talking a lot more about that. So I'm trying not to steal everybody's thunder. But one of the things is with early detachment, we have some savings we know we're going to generate on the fixed side. There's going to be some fixed cost savings, and it's really kind of a one-time savings for finishing in November. We had budgeted that we would be finished in January. So,
Is this the
so 2 months
700
early.
something
This is
thousand?
the 760,000.
Yep.
There was an alternative thrown out when we discussed, hey, how about accelerating a CIP project? So the ad we'd like to make today is discuss options for acceleration of CIP projects with the early detachment savings.
And where would you like that on the agenda, Jake?
Why don't we discuss it
You want to do it between the pump station and the
I-
tank maintenance?
that's where I was kind of pointing. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we'll make that 9A. And we'll call that, I can't call it wretched excess. That can't go on the agenda. So we will call that surplus discussion.
Sure.
How's that?
Great.
Detachment surplus discussion.
Perfect.
Okay, all right. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Attachment surplus discussion. Okay, so it has been proposed that we insert item 9A between 9 and 10 called detachment surplus discussion. And do I have to do a separate motion on that, or can I just say, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Right, I can do that. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Motion.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay, Carrie moves and Steve seconds. All those in favor of the amended agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
But
Nay.
you gotta do a roll call vote, because I'm remote.
Oh, there you are, Meg. Yes, we have to do a roll call because you're there now. Okay,
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Member McKesson,
Aye.
member Marnett,
Aye.
member Dale,
Aye.
member Gasca,
Aye.
member Nelson.
aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 5.
Okay, the motion is unique. Welcome, Meg. Glad to see you.
Yep, good to see you guys.
Cool. Okay, so we have approved the agenda. That's item 6. Item 7, public comment. Do we have any?
We have no members of the public comment.
Okay, so I don't have to read all that stuff. And we go to item 8, approval of minutes. All of you have received a copy of the draft minutes as prepared by Therese and her crew. And are there do any of you have any comments or suggested changes to the minutes? And if not, then I'm looking for a motion to approve, and we'll have to do a roll call vote for that. Any comments, suggestions?
Nope. So I move that we approve the minutes as so nicely documented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, so Steve moves and Carrie seconds a motion to approve the minutes. So we'll have a roll call vote now, Therese?
Member McKesson,
Aye.
member Marnett,
Aye.
member Dale,
Aye.
member Nelson,
Aye.
member Gasca.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Excellent. So that takes us to item number 9. Discuss and consider an increase of $1,150,000 to the pump station fiscal year 24-25 project budget. Project number 60013 for a total budget of $4.55 million. And this project is in Division 1. So I'm assuming some people are going to speak to this, right?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the lead. This is Chad. How is everybody today?
Good.
So, some background on this, the committee has been provided with an updated, there was a mathematical typo in the financial section, and we can point out the specific typo, but at the bottom of the memo, we had to change, I think it was 2.1 to 1.7, corrected 2 different numbers, so that'll go to the board. What the genesis for the need for the increase in the project budget is back when this was being inked with EFI, the sales tax was unknown. And then during the project, when we finalized the fiscal budget that we're currently in, which was adopted June of this calendar year, staff forgot in that process that sales tax had been occurring on the invoices received to date. When we prepared budgets for all CIPs, this one included, we were looking at the remaining balances for each project. How much do we owe on everything? And the sales tax was not included in that. So that's an error that staff made. It was being paid. It was always going to be paid. It's not an increase to the overall project itself. It just was caught late. And that accounts for roughly $524,000 of the 1.15 that Chairperson Nelson mentioned. The additional money actually comes from really positive things, change orders to the contractor and expediting with SDG&E, our general contractor staff, and everybody else to bring these pump stations online well ahead of schedule early. As the committee is aware, all 3 pump stations are online. And as Jake mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we have officially detached. And so those savings are being realized as we speak. And so the 2 major change orders, roughly almost $400,000 to Pacific Hydrotech. Some of those were to air freight the valves. Again, expedited, saved months off of the overall project, and then some other miscellaneous things. So that's the bulk of where this money is coming from. The project is in its final stages of generating a punch list and cleanup. And so we are through, but this increase in cost is necessary to complete.
Is this California sales tax we have to pay?
Yes.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, and as a pseudo public entity, we're not exempt? This doesn't make sense.
Great question. I'm going to defer to Rick on this because Rick actually had several conversations both with staff and our legal counsel on that very topic. So Rick, if you could take that.
Yes, so we're only thing we're generally exempt from is property tax, not sales tax. And in this case, there was some deliberation, and I'm not sure what the initial discussions were. I came in afterwards to verify that yes, indeed, we actually did need to pay all the sales tax. But it still applies even though these were, pre-manufactured pump stations. It applies, and we double checked with our legal that there's not some exemption, but it's accurate. So we ended up needing to pay it. So 7.75% on yeah.
Could I ask a question to Jake? Just before we go into deliberations here, I noticed Hoke Consulting's on here. The action today does not involve any change of the contract for Hoke Consulting. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there was no financial.
Thank you.
Yep. I'll clarify one thing too. Part of the change orders that we issued to Pacific Hydrotech, which obviously increased the cost of the overall construction contract. So it obviously did allow us to finish early. Our actual big risk was finishing late, which is part of the reason why we pushed those ahead. The big risk was not finishing by January 1st and therefore having to push across some pretty significant rate increases by the San Diego County Water Authority that are looming, that we were trying to avoid. So there was, as we got into the project, there was really 2 main items. And the board, I think we definitely reviewed these with the board. In that they were just long lead items. We're still, although things have improved, some of those supply chain issues still remain. And
Okay.
so it was Chad mentioned the valves. So getting some,
Here.
yeah, expedited shipping on the valves. And then the other big one is the electrical equipment. There has been, that's been a killer on a lot of these projects is just being able to acquire switchgear and those kind of things. So we're able to advance the procurement of some of that switchgear. It did end up, all that stuff really came in a timely manner because of the actions. And so we were actually able to finish a couple months early. That's why we're talking about the savings in the next item. But really it was an effort to not have this project delayed by months was some of those costs. So that's, yeah.
Any other comments? I have one, and I need to I'm having a hard time with the numbers, and I think this is sometimes what happens when we put a lot of numbers out there. I think it's hard to understand and get them to justify and rationalize without maybe some inside baseball knowledge, which I don't have. And so and I also have to confess that I have a bias about this project. I have never been a fan of this project in total. I have always felt like we could have made do with 1 or maybe 2 fewer pump stations in the near term and avoided cutting our pipeline rehab and replacement program. But so you have to understand that I come at this with a little bit of a negative bias and you can straighten me out as appropriate. But I'm just having a problem with some numbers. For example, in the attachment one summary of project expenses that looks like this, the one with the blue stuff. It shows that for EFI, the total projected expenses for FY 24-25 is $473,000 and change. And when I look at the other chart, this one, it shows that the summary of project expenses is 379,908, which is 100,000, no, 90,000. Yeah, 100,000, almost $100,000 difference. And I just continue to have issues that, you know, with some of the numbers. It shows that we're going to spend a total of 7.193 million with them.
So I can probably clarify that one pretty quick.
Yeah,
So the first table that you're looking at, yes, that one, attachment one, summary project.
the blue one.
Is looking at things from total expenses in just this fiscal year, including what has been paid and what we expect remaining to be paid.
Mhm.
The second attachment that shows the multiple fiscal years is only what has been paid. It does not look at what is remaining to be paid. So in the case of EFI, there's 94,000 left to be paid that won't show in that expense because it hasn't been paid yet. So one shows actual activity to date for all fiscal years, and the other one shows just this fiscal year because we're asking for a budget amendment for just this fiscal year. So two different lenses. So for instance,
I understand that this is just for this fiscal year
and includes remaining expenses yet to be paid.
and this does not.
And that does not. That's only things paid so far.
So if I am looking at the hydrotech line, I see that so far on the multi-year chart, it shows that we have paid 5.1 million. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Mhm.
Okay. And the board, it says in the text, the board awarded the original contract at 5.65 million.
Mhm.
So we've spent $500,000 less than was contracted, and then we have the $398,000 change order that gets added to what we spent already. Is that the way this works?
And invoices that we haven't received yet.
245,000, right?
That seems to be right,
Yeah.
but yes. Yeah, some of this is a timing game of
So
there's active contract. We just
I
have
get
to
it.
send a few months worth of invoices.
I totally get it. If we awarded a contract for 5.65 million and we have a change order of just under 400,000, why wouldn't that drive the contract up to 6 million and change? Because
That's that number represents.
okay, and then 245,000 more, is that right?
Yes, that's the line items underneath it on this blue one.
Says right here, 245.
These specific hydrotech line items are
Uh-huh.
change orders not yet processed yet, but anticipated.
And those are change orders to the Pacific Hydrotech
Yes.
contract?
Yes,
Okay, all right. So that explains why we have these big gaps here, because these are part of,
these are change orders, the ones right underneath the Pacific Hydrotech line that haven't actually been processed yet. So they're not technically a part of the contract. We're anticipating them, so they're part of the anticipated spending. The line items below, at the very bottom are either very small, so they don't have a specific contract, or they're things like staff time that aren't really, they're anticipated expenses, but not necessarily firm contracts that we have. So we didn't put a contract amount, but you have what's anticipated for the total.
and these these SDG&E payments, we've already made those?
Yes,
Those have been made.
yes.
All right. So I apologize, but I had a very hard time sorting all this out. And so I think I'll stop here.
I have a question. If you
Yeah, yeah.
want to take more time to think about more questions.
Yeah.
What was the change order for in regards to with the Pacific Hydrotech?
I can take that. So there was two. Pull it up here.
Talking about the 400,000, 398?
Just.
Yeah.
What was it for?
398 and change, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
not the dollar amount, but what was it that
Right.
happened? Yeah.
I got it. All right. So starting with change order number 1, during the design work, we have 3 normally closed valves, but they're on the discharge, the high pressure side. They were not called out as high pressure gate valves. And so we increased that was a change order of $25,653 for 3 valves with class 300 flanges. The second part was using temporary switchgear to get SDG&E and all the electrical online. That was in the amount of $89,028. And a note on that, the permanent switchgear arrived late last week. And so we are currently coordinating with SDG&E on that. But as Jake mentioned earlier, had we not done the temporary switchgear and that increased amount of $89,000, these pump stations would still be months away from coming online. And then on change order 1, there was 2 more items. Both of those were at no cost. It was delete some flexible couplings and replace with welded butt straps, no cost, and increase the diameter at West Lilac of the pump station pump barrel from 20 inches to 24 inches. Again, no cost on that. So that change order in total was $114,681. Any questions on change order 1 before I recap change order 2?
Not for me.
Okay. And then change order number 2 was to air freight the butterfly valves and install the temporary switchgear. So those, when we ordered these valves, they are coming from South Korea. They come via a boat. They go through customs. It was going to be several months of lead time. We opted to air freight them, and we had them within a matter of weeks. And then also to install that temporary switchgear. This change order also covered the contract work rather covers the removal and setup. So when we are coordinating with SDG&E and we're going to take out the temporary switchgear and install the new, that's contractual work. So there's no double charge for there. And change order number 2 was in the amount of $283,733.
So it sounds like some of the charges were associated with expediting the project,
That is correct.
which is what we were driving anyways. Yeah.
Correct.
And while we're on the subject of Pacific Hydrotech, we have, if I'm reading this right, help me out now, Rick. If I'm reading this right, we have paid them 5.12, almost 5.125 million so far, right?
Yes.
Okay. And by approving the change order for 398,000 plus, approving that change order, we've driven the contract ceiling up to 6,055,000, right?
Yes.
So that means that we still have 900,000 to push out the door to them?
We have on the existing contract, 661 left to spend, and then if you add up the remaining change orders that haven't technically been solidified yet, it's those 4 line items that are less than 200,000. So in total, a little less than 900,000. I think you're tracking the same way.
Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So on the attachment 1, when we're looking at remaining to bill, it means the work's been done and they need to bill the district for the work.
Not
Or-
necessarily. It's just either if there's an existing contract, they haven't either invoiced us, we haven't received the invoice, or they haven't done the work yet at the point in time that we did the report. or the change orders, which are the line items beneath that. They've, Chad, you'll have to correct, I think they've done the work. But we haven't necessarily negotiated the exact amounts of the change orders yet. Those are anticipated.
That is correct.
Is it normally our practice to seek approval for a change order after the work has been performed and done, or do we typically get an estimate on the price of a change order and get an approval for that and then give them the green light to proceed, do the work, and then invoice us? What is our business process?
Yeah, typically if, if we've got a change condition on a contract, that'll obviously come through engineering and our construction manager. If it's within general manager's authority, it'll come, or within the, authority given under the contract, that ultimately that'll come to me for, approval. I would say typically we like to do that before, when we identify, like I'll say in the case of where we had to up the pressure on the valves, right? That was negotiated before they actually placed the order. It came to me. Some of these, and obviously this was working with the contractor. Some of these they did do the work. Like, there was situations where our SDG&E inspector came out, and in order to pass inspection, he was requesting additional bollards be placed, paint those white, move that over there, pour a extra pad on the concrete, and we went ahead and authorized the work. And hey, we'll negotiate these things as as they come in. So again, we prefer to do it ahead of time. There are certain situations where we
understand
do
that.
expedite the work.
You have expedient
Yeah,
situations where you've got to move, or the costs of waiting to do all of that are much greater than the
correct.
potential for being juiced a little because we just kept running, right?
But yeah,
I get that.
But typically, yeah, if we've got the time to go, hey, let's negotiate this, figure out the price. Yes, we'll authorize this, and then it goes from there. That's kind of standard practice. I'll say on one of these, we are negotiating. That there is a little difference of opinion on the extra work, and there was multiple mobilizations for a crane to move those buildings as they came in. It was a timing issue, and so we're still negotiating that. Again, we went ahead and we needed to get everything set, and we went ahead and did it. But there is a little bit of discussion going on that too. So that's kind of a unique one as well.
I'm wondering if Ricky could walk us through the explanation and the fiscal impacts on mitigating the underfunding, because I'm not quite following it.
Yeah, so this one's tricky. Again, it's a situation of a lot of numbers, so I'll try and tell the story first, and then we'll get into the numbers. So you have a total project cost all in, including things we haven't paid yet, estimated, say approximately 15.5 million, multiple years. The whole project, all years, all expenses, 15.5. We have two sources of debt funding that we've used to pay for this. One, a portion of the 10 million that we issued with US Bank earlier this spring, was more than half of that was dedicated for this. And then a couple of years ago, we did a 9.75 million debt issuance with Western Alliance, where the vast majority of that was dedicated towards this project. When we budgeted our fiscal plan for this year, the assumption was all expenses on this project were being paid for by debt. So there's no other set aside source of funding. So to the extent that any amount goes over essentially the US Bank amount that we have set aside for that has to be covered by something else, net revenues or savings. So you'll see two lenses there. One is, hey, we're over what we had set aside in debt. So we need to come up with real hard cash funding for that because we don't have it in the budget. And the other one is a budgetary figure, which covers the expenses just in this year. So in my opinion, the really important number is we need to have enough physical cash to cover the expenses. And so that to put that way. So the total project's 15.5. This is where we talk about, what is it? Leaves 1.7 million without, we're 1.7 over what we had set aside in debt funding for this project. And that's because this is multiple fiscal years, and so it gets hard because every time we do a number, it's a point in time and we're looking forward. And so, but the project was ongoing and active, and so some of the timing estimates were a little bit off on the expenses. So that's the bottom line numbers. We need 1.7 to cover the full expenses of this project that we don't already have in existing debt. So the plan to cover that is we're thinking of and proposing doing financing for the exit fee. We were just going to do the remaining exit fee because we just did the $3.2 million payment. And so and that's what was in our plan, was we would fund the remaining exit fee, which is 13.6, yeah, over the next 4 years, to up that to the full 15.8, which means that we're covering 3.2 million in this year's expenses that we were just going to pay out of pocket. And so by doing that, we sort of add to our reserves and allow for us to pay this 1.7 and leaves us 1.5 left over. So again, a lot of numbers, but this additional financing to cover the full exit fee payment, if we do it at the full 15.8, it covers the extra on this project and then leaves 1.5 left over, which would, this is the bigger picture, also cover the option to not put through a pass-through rate increase on January 1st.
And so the 1.5, Rick,
Mhm.
excuse me. The 1.5, when it says in any other additional unanticipated expenses or reduced revenue, that's not talking about the pump station project. That's
No.
talking about much
Broader.
bigger picture, right?
Yes,
That's also where I got a little confused, but I got you now. Okay, I got you.
such
Yeah.
as not putting through the pass-through increase. That's what it's getting at.
Right.
I know it almost seems like it's two different actions. I mean, I'm fine with the change orders. It helped us get to our goal of getting it
Right.
done early.
Well, the real,
goals is-
yeah, the real action today is we need we're requesting the budget amendment. That's the 1.15. That is what we're shy on the approved budget for this fiscal year for the project. So that is really the request. The discussion on the fiscal analysis, next week at Budget and Finance and the board on the 19th, we're going to be discussing the debt financing. The board approved a resolution at the last board meeting that at least gives us the option to finance that additional, the payment that we've already made, should we want to do that. But really the action today is just the budget amendment for the project.
Can I just offer a comment, please? I realize that this is a very complicated, lot of numbers situation. And the more I've looked at this and the fact that we had so much focus in the write-up and on the charts on the pump station projects, I'm still having a hard time understanding, other than, I don't know, maybe just the fact, I don't understand how we come up with 1.15 million. That's my, I don't see an obvious, we're 1.5 short. And it could be that I've gotten lost in all this other stuff. Okay. So if you could just sort me, please. Where does it tell us that we are 1.15 million short and shows us how we got to be that way?
So that would be your attachment one, this one with the blue headers. Essentially between what we've spent so far and what we expect to spend, those are the columns 2 and 3, build and remaining to build. We expect to spend in this fiscal year 4.5 million. But we only have budgeted 3.4. So the difference between those is the 1.15 million. Because those expenses relate to this fiscal year, even though this is a multi-year project.
And in reality, where the cash is coming from or all that kind of aside, it's really just the budget needed to close the project out. That is really what we're talking about.
And it
Where,
goes,
where's the 1.15 coming from?
So that's where the fiscal impact section comes in. The short version is, when we finance the exit fee, that's a plan right now before the board this month. We are upping it by 3.2 million from what we would have done before.
So we don't actually have it.
No,
yeah, that's the,
Without the 3.2 move around.
without,
Without
Additional debt.
financing the forwards.
or cuts to other things,
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about other projects,
right?
taking out of reserves, which is not recommended. We're critical low levels on reserves. So there, I mean, yes, but this is our recommendation on how to cover it.
Okay, and you don't expect any surprises from the banks adding 3.2 more million onto,
no.
You're going to ask.
At this point, it's already been negotiated. It just needs to be approved by the board in a couple of weeks if they.
okay,
they
so the
agree.
bank knows about this, they're okay with it.
Yes,
They just want to make lots of interest on us and they're happy. Okay,
pretty good interest rate, 4.6%.
that's not
Right.
too bad.
Well, like I was mentioning before, I'm okay with the change orders and approving the budget. It's where is the money coming from? That is hard for me to make a decision on right now. I feel like there's a lot of moving pieces here and we don't really have all the information to make that decision. And it's really a bigger
It is. I think what
discussion, I think.
I think what you have there is our recommendation for how to cover it, but it will be a item on budget and finance, and it will be an item for the board on November 19th.
Does the
So
700 and something $1,000 play into this in the sense?
it certainly could, and my second slide will dive into that a little bit. Yes. Hence the 9A.
Can we table this until some of those?
We really need to do the budget amendment because we need to pay, I mean, we need to pay the contractor. How we pay them, absolutely, there can be more discussion on, or where the funds come from. Absolutely can have more discussion, but we do need to move forward on the budget amendment because we need to close the project out. We're gonna owe those funds.
So you want us to approve the 1.15, so to speak, and then it's your additional problem to figure out where to get it.
Well, it's going to come down to really the board's discretion on that. And, you know, there will be a couple of options. Again, our recommendation is to extend the financing. We've already negotiated the additional exit fees. So there's actually, I guess what you'd call it as far as cash flow or budget, there's actually positive budget impacts to that. So that is our recommendation on how to cover it. Of course, you know, the board has discretion on, we could pull it from reserves. We could, you know, there are other options available to us. They just aren't favorable in staff's opinion.
What happens if we don't? First of all, I'll say it now, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out why this is an engineering and operations. I mean, at first I thought, and so that's why I was deep into all these numbers. I thought that we were looking at change orders to existing contracts to EFI and to Pacific Hydro and approval of change orders. But then I heard that really what we're doing is we're figuring out that we need to raise the budget and that we need to do that quickly. However, it seems to me that the staff has already increased the budget by authorizing the work, triggering the work, and in essence, making a commitment on behalf of the district, making a commitment to pay for the work. It seems to me that that's been done. And so now I'm having a hard time, Jake, with what is the urgency? There was no problem with urgency 4 months ago when we were saying, go do this, go do this, go do this to contractors and whatever. What is it? Is it because we've got a date that's in front of us that we have to hit? What's the deal?
Well, not necessarily. And you're correct. I think, you know, obviously we had a date in mind on how we needed to finish this project. And again, some of these change orders are pending change orders. So that was part of it. Really, I mean, the big chunk of it was, there was a omission from this year's fiscal budget that didn't include that sales tax number. That is really what came to light over the last month, 4 weeks. Hey, we've got the sales tax that's impacting that total contract number that was just not considered. And so that's half of what we're talking about here. The other are pending change orders. There are pending change orders, but there are costs. In essence, we've tried to bring you everything. This is everything it's going to take to complete the project.
And I appreciate that.
Even though we haven't approved all of those things now, we're going to need to approve and whether it's plus or minus 100,000, could come in under if those change order negotiations go favorably. But we wanted to bring you kind of the entire scenario, and yeah, we need the additional budget to close the project out, partly because of an omission and partly because there are change orders that were required to finish the project.
So on the topic of the omission, I'm trying to grasp how we got to the point. So in the description in the draft memo, it says that it was decided to not include any tax because we didn't know what the tax would be, and we'll decide that down the road when we know it. How do we get to a point where certainly we could have estimated it's 7%, 6.5%, but we're sitting here, we could be sitting here looking at a 1% change, not a whole 8% change.
Yeah.
How do we get there, and how do we not do that again?
Well, yeah, I hear you. I think really how we got there was, there was, I'll call it some turnover in staff, right? Where, and I think when we approved, this is me kind of piecing it all together as well, but when we approved that contract, I think it was kind of one of those, yeah, we'll deal with it when it comes, and not being aware that it was coming as we're going through the fiscal year budget. It just wasn't included. This is what's left on the contract. That's all that, finance was aware of. And so that's what came through on the budget, and it just wasn't caught. It was.
Could I just make a suggestion? I'm gonna jump on here real quick. Can I make a suggestion that the sentence that says sales tax was not included in the initial project budget as the applicable taxes were not able to be provided during the signing of the agreement? Could you just write that is not?
It just wasn't included. I mean, it just wasn't included in our budget.
Yeah, but it makes it sound as if there was some block of information that was not available to us.
Well,
or whatever,
to not include it.
or it was our intent to punt and wait and see. And I mean, I think it's okay to just say, hey, this was an oversight.
It
Have
is.
oversight. Just say it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Put it in here because it certainly misled me.
Okay.
Okay. It
Fair enough.
misled me into thinking that we had some technical problem about why we couldn't calculate sales tax.
Yeah.
So I just think we ought to say that. Now, back to you.
You took over for what I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to say it.
So I know that we went through a series of workshops over the spring in order to develop the budget. And I know that we ultimately came to a point where the board had asked that almost $1 million be cut, which staff responded and was able to do that with the budget. And this is just putting it back in. So I'm not necessarily in support of adding that to the budget. I'd be in support of, pulling back on some other things that deducts that same amount from the budget so the expenses stay the same. I think we just need to really hold the line on the expenses till we get through this. I appreciate that everyone went through the exercise to get the pump stations in place in advance of January.
I hear you. I mean, obviously there's some revenue that we're going to be talking about that's a potential option. I think beyond that, it's probably going to be cutting additional CIP. That's where you're going to end up. So that would be the next case. And to be quite honest, there's not a tremendous amount of CIP in the first 2 years of the budget, which is kind of what we had funded. And so obviously we can look at that, but that's probably what that's what you're looking at.
You've only got
Right.
2 months left of the year, so
Well, fiscal year through July.
Oh,
Fiscal year through July.
so there is some amount that could be grabbed backwards.
Yes.
Not
And I think actually they're probably there probably will be some savings on a couple of items. I'll tell you now that I know we had an overage on the purchase of the San Diego County Water Authority facilities. We had a budget amendment, to the high side on that one. But as we've worked through the operations plan, what we were talking about is the interim and permanent decommissioning. Those requirements have decreased significantly. And so the main cost was a couple of years out because we didn't anticipate the permanent decommissioning to happen for a few years. And we actually built that into the settlement agreement to give us that flexibility on timing. But the interim was this year, and we basically boiled it down to where we're just closing a couple of valves. And so there's a couple $100,000 there. And I think, there is some options for savings, and obviously we've got some additional revenues because of the early finish, and that is part of my presentation on the next item. So I think it does. Well, I told you there's 100 different ways. But that is where we're at. Obviously we're gonna in the future, looking at sales tax and things like that. This is not something we strive for to miss on budgets like that. And so we're
And projects like this don't have a contingency usually that's authorized.
20% overrun, they more than used whatever contingency.
Ah.
they had.
Yeah, I don't think we did. It was just a flat budget. That's another thing to just for this group, and something we've talked about internally actually for a little while. Once you kind of start down this path, it takes a minute to kind of reorient things, especially with some of the cash flow struggles that we've had. One of the things we do want to change moving forward is when we are funding these projects, right, to get out of the practice of funding fiscal year by fiscal year. And I think that's one of the things that will help. Now in the sales tax situation, maybe not so much, but I think it's ripe for error. And really what we want to do is when you fund a project, we say, hey, this is design, this is construction, we're allocating $1 million or $3 million, whatever it is. And that is the project budget from here until the end of the project, unless amended. And it doesn't matter if it's June or August of a fiscal
I
year.
echo that so strongly because I lived in a world where I was in charge of a lot of capital projects worth a lot of money. And we did not have the spending up by phase, and each phase gave us a higher degree of confidence about what is the ETC, estimate to complete.
Yeah.
Each phase gave us more security about what that was. It allowed us to set appropriate contingencies. And so in the planning phase, we could go as high as a 25% contingency. By the time we got to construction, we were down to 10% or less.
Right.
But the life of the project was its own separate life that was outside the fiscal year budget.
Yep.
And it allowed the people that prosecuted the project to view it as such, that this thing has its own life and we live inside that bubble, and that's what it is. And boy, would I echo what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're
why this is all crazyville to me.
It's hard to follow, and again, it kind of leads to error. But and so as we wind these projects down, as you see new projects come forward, that is the that is the approach. So yeah.
Can we freeze the decision on this for 15 minutes and you go to the part 2?
You want to talk about the projects or the plus funding?
Next thing that you said there might be money savings and
Sure.
kickbacks, and then we'll get a feel and she'll have a better feel of.
Okay.
Do we do?
Is it
the
agreed
3
then that we
million
will
vote?
momentarily table this conversation and allow Jake to proceed with item 9A? Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. All right, Jake.
All right. And I did have a couple slides on this. Nothing too. So yeah, and I mentioned this a little bit at the onset here, but we with detachment coming in November, there is some savings associated with our water purchase cost, from that November to January timeframe, because our fiscal year budget had assumed that we would detach on January 1. And so everything was really based on that we would start paying the Eastern rates January 1 through June 30th. And we'll be paying November 1st through June 30th. So next slide. There we go. So what we've done is that, we took the 2 months and really the savings that we know are firm, and that's really on the fixed cost side. There's approximately 768,800 for those 2 months in savings from our budgeted costs for the fiscal year that the district will see. And so, we had a pretty robust discussion at the board meeting about potential uses for that, and lots of kind of options kicked around and how we want to incorporate that into our budget, or what we want to do with those funds. And so, one of the options that was thrown out was, hey, why don't we accelerate some CIP? We've been deferring CIP for a long time, and are there projects we can move up, or how do we want to deal with that? So really, I've got 4 options today. 3 of them are projects. The one is the item we just talked about, the overage on the pump station. So we have a $1.1 million overage. The second project is a project that was budgeted for year 2 of the CIP. So we're, but it's in that range, that $700,000 range. That's what we had pushed to year 2. It is a pipeline replacement, so a rehab replacement project. So through this option is we accelerate that and go ahead and do it now. Obviously that would free up that $700,000 in year 2, depending on how you want to look at it. Wanted to give some other options, just, kind of top projects that kind of in different categories. We think this is, the pipeline replacement, that's really our top rehab replacement project. That's one we want to get done. And I'll talk a little bit about the project, but you've seen it as part of the CIP. The other projects, one is a water quality project, and operations. This is kind of top of their bucket list, and we were going to start talking about this. But really, RCS system, which is a residual control. And so this has to do with our disinfection residuals, and really struggle in certain locations within our system to maintain that positive residual. This one in particular at our southern tanks, we're moving water from Morrow now all the way down to the southern tanks. In particular during low demand periods and things like that, residual control is tough. And basically we have to do it at Morrow. So you're maintaining a disinfection residual in a very large body of water, enough to be able to transmit it down to those southern tanks and then hold on long enough toward the demand to take it. So, wintertime, and that becomes difficult. So we can talk a little bit more about it, but that's another project that I know our operations staff would actually provide them a incredible amount of flexibility in their operations. Another, just a reliability project. And right now the Lilac pump station, the Lilac pump station lacks a backup generator. And so we do have one at the Rancho Amigos pump station. Out of the 3 new pump stations that we've got, we have one at the Rancho Amigos. Does provide us some flexibility. We can move water some different ways, but ideally for reliability purposes, we would like to see the ability to at least power one pump at the Lilac pump station with a backup generator. So next slide, I'll kind of go through them one by one. So this is what we just talked about. So we have 1.15 million in additional funding need. We actually looked at this option in a way with the board at the last board meeting. And really the option that we brought to the board was reducing the debt funding need. So instead of financing 15.8 million, we would pull this 700,000-800,000 off of that debt funding need and only finance, say, 15 million. It saves an additional $209,000 in interest over, we're proposing a 10-year period. But in essence, what it does is it pulls $80,000 out of, you know, this. Again, you can look at it 100 different ways, but basically it would help fund this, right? You could go 780,000 towards this. It offsets your need to procure additional financing. So this is a potential use for that funding savings that would be budget neutral in this fiscal year. So you'd basically pull 780,000 out of that $1.15 million need. The replacement project, again, La Cañada pipeline replacement, it's had many leaks just in the last 5 years. It is high pressure. If you've seen, I've seen the videos on it. It's not a great situation when this pipeline breaks, and it continues to break. And so the project was, we were going to install some pressure reducing stations to lower the pressure within that line, and then ultimately replace that pipeline. So we were going to do it in 2 fiscal years, again, kind of spreading the budget out. So the 150,000 was already approved for this year, and 700,000 for next year to actually do the pipeline work itself. 150 was for the pressure reducing stations. So the $700,000 number that was pushed into next year obviously matches up pretty well with the savings we're going to see. We thought this is our highest priority project. This might be an opportunity to advance that and free up some funds for next year. Next slide. There you go. So this is the water quality, you know, the water quality improvement that really OPS is taking a hard look at. Really what involves, you know, there's a mixer in the tank and a chemical storage and feed system. And basically what it allows you to do, you've got a disinfection residual coming in. As that residual starts to drop, this feeds additional chemical within a smaller volume of water and just make sure the water is basically fresh coming out of those southern tanks.
What is a residual, please?
That's basically it's your disinfection residual. It ensures, when you have a residual, it ensures that you don't have any viruses, anything in the water, things that get people sick. So, right. So if I have a 1 part chlorine residual, I know I don't have anything that's eaten up that chlorine. Right. So now I know you know, it's really what allows people to not get sick when they drink the water here in the US. And so, but when water sits, that residual starts to go away over time. The disinfection residual will be eaten up. And so as it gets down to low levels, this basically helps. It's going to mix the tank, keep that disinfection residual at a normal level, and make sure the water that we're delivering.
Is the residual the same thing as a parts per million?
It is. And usually, yeah, 1 part. Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is.
That I can understand. I just
Okay.
couldn't figure out what's the residue. You know, I was having a
Yeah.
hard time.
No, it's actually just a residual of chlorine in the water.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is why you're not putting 4 million gallons in the tanks. You're only putting
Yes.
1 million in.
Yes, our operators have to cycle these tanks, deep cycle the tanks on a daily basis to make sure the water stays fresh. And again, when demand's high, it's not so difficult, right? You got that water going out, bring fresh water in, no problem. But any kind of other operational parameter, you know, operational scenarios we go into, whether it's low demand, that's kind of the big
Rainy
one.
season.
Yeah, and that's months, right? Months and months. So this would really help during those time periods. But also, like right now, we got a 72-hour notice on a potential for a public safety power shut off. Sorry,
Okay.
too many P's and S's. And so when we get those protocols, they've got a nice system where we start to puff the water up in the tanks, fill them up to, you know, if it's this kind of alert, we fill them to 75%, make sure if we have a power shut off, we've got plenty of storage in there. The problem is, if it doesn't come and your demand's not high, now you have a whole bunch of water that you need to get rid of. And so it's just an example of different operational needs kind of cause these, it just caused some hardship for our operations group to kind of maintain those chlorine residuals. And they really have no ability here other than, you know, I mean, potentially you start flushing water, right? You start getting rid of water to move it.
I don't understand, Jake. You got to remember, this is not something that I have a lot of experience with. I don't understand. We got a tank full of water.
Correct.
And we got a device that injects some chemical that we want into the water.
Correct.
And we've got a mixer.
Yep.
That will mix the water.
So it's uniform. Yep.
And keep it uniform. And So if the water's gonna sit there longer than we'd like, why can't we just run the mixer again? What's the problem? Why do
No,
we
you-
need some special new system?
No,
when
you
we
can.
Just run the mixer.
We don't have a mixer or the residual control.
Correct.
Yeah, so the mixer will help. The mixer will help, but currently we don't have either of these in there. And so the mixer added with the chemical storage and feed basically gives you the ability to go, hey, my residual's down to 0.1. I
I
need
didn't
to,
realize that there were no mixers in any of our tanks.
But we have mixers in some of the tanks, not the southern,
not these ones.
not these three in the south.
Now I understand.
Yeah, so this is
Okay.
adding them to the 3 tanks in the south. Potential project, you'll likely hear more about it in the next, during the next budget
Quarter
cycle.
mil a pop, is that what it is?
About, yeah.
Yep, okay.
So it would be possible to equip one of the 3 tanks for a lesser amount of money, keep that one fuller than the other 2. when you
Yeah.
need to have more water. It just,
True, but
it's tricky to manage.
it does. And the zones are kind of managed in 3 parts. And so we can do that. We can open them up and move some water that way, but really, ideally, all 3 tanks would have one to be able to operate those 3 zones. There is kind of 3 separate zones. Next one. So the genset, so this is the picture of Rancho Amigos. This is the Rancho Amigos pump station. It does include a backup generator. That's the building with the big louvers on it. So this moves water up into the Turner tank. And so we're looking to do something similar out at the Lilac pump station that just gives us, again, a little more, a little more ability to move water into that Hutton zone, which can be a high demand zone during power outages and things like that. The one about this is one we're probably going to target some grant funding on. In years past, there was a lot of funding available for backup generator projects. It seemed to have dried up a little bit. Funding from the state's not quite there. And to be honest, we haven't had, at least in our county, any kind of a big fire, natural disaster that and a lot of times that actually drives the funding because it comes through FEMA and through Cal OES, and it funds a lot of those projects, and we just haven't had one the last few years. So I'm not hoping for one, but I think this is a candidate. This would be a candidate, and I think that's what our intent was to try to. But obviously, you could accelerate this project that would add some reliability to the system with those funds. It's about in that kind of cost category, $750,000 to get something kind of state of the art at that facility that would serve that purpose. So I think that was the last slide. So
when you say it would be potential grant funded, is that federal? Is that state funding, grant funding? What are you
yeah,
talking
historically these have come through. I think there's been both. I mean, the states funded certain things, but a lot of times when you have FEMA money, it ends up coming through Cal OES, which is the state program for emergency services, and that's usually where it comes through.
That's
yeah.
the local match.
You do have a match. It's
Yeah.
usually 70, was it 75-25 is the typical. So yeah.
So the 75 comes from FEMA, the 25 comes from that state program, and that's
And
it.
25 comes from us.
Comes from us.
Yeah, typically. So still, but I mean, if you can get 75% of it paid for, obviously
Yeah,
that's
good, yeah.
that's a good thing. So, so that's really where we're going with this one, but it is kind of on our higher priority list to get something here to just add a little more reliability down in that southern end. Because we don't have those connections anymore. So,
about? Could you back it up to the first slide, please?
Go ahead.
Could you reserve 75,000 to be your match? In this budget. Then the rest elsewhere. In the event, in the event that the state funding comes through.
yeah, well, I mean, that project is not in our current budget. So
So you took 75,750 and said, that's our match or whatever it is.
yeah,
Then you'd have the potential to do it within the year. And that could be a little reserve that's just sitting there for that purpose. You may need it for other things later, but
yeah.
it would give you the opportunity to be ready.
How did you get to 75,000?
So whatever the match, they're $250,000 a piece. And you were saying, about 10% would come from us.
Well, the generator we're thinking is somewhere in the neighborhood,
25%.
750 to $1 million. So you're talking 200 to 250,000 would be the district share.
Okay.
Yeah,
It would be a bigger.
it'd be a bigger chunk. Yeah.
You're done, Mig?
No, could you back it up to the first chart, please?
Right there.
Yeah, so the 768,800 is the total over the saved over the 2 months, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what 38,000 or 84,000. I think I
Correct.
had it. Okay, yeah, 384,400. So is that it, or is that going to continue on a monthly basis out to the
It's good.
future?
It's a good question. And we talked about this at the board. Again, this is really our savings against our budget for this fiscal year. Moving forward,
Yeah.
there's more to consider. Obviously, we have exit fee payment. We've got, the additional debt that we took on earlier this year. And all of those things kind of affect us going forward. We were basically what we were looking at kind of under two different lenses. One being, hey, we finished early. It's something we unexpected. And so we've got this chunk of money. Again, that chunk of money can go right towards any expense that you want. It was really just a savings that we didn't anticipate. Going
Right.
forward, I think it's more longer term, right? You're looking at
Right.
those long-term costs versus the savings. And that's where you kind of get more into the stabilization of rates and getting our reserves back to a level that's a little more comfortable, funding CIP, those kind of things. This was really what we were looking at it as is a one-time, really just a one-time savings because we finished early.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the concern that I have is that you're looking at taking all of it and trying to apply it to different projects. My perspective, if I was sitting on the board, I would be telling you some of that money should be going back to the people. Okay, I don't see that.
Yeah.
And that's it's an opportunity to get to buy, if you will, goodwill, because they put their neck out and they made that move, and they ought to be able to see some kind of a return on their action. And that's basically what I'll say about the money. As far as the different projects, it would seem that the fourth item has an alternate potential source of funding. I guess the question is, do any of the others have a potential source of funding? And I guess what wasn't super clear to me was, like in the case of the fourth one, if it's a 75-25 split, it just wasn't real clear to me, what our amount would be on a grant process, what that total number would be. And then I guess with regard to the pipeline replacement, is that item in the top 10 list of projects? Because I don't see a ranking for it. That would be, I guess my big question.
Yeah.
Are there other projects that are maybe a little bit bigger or maybe a little bit smaller, but that are a higher priority on the ranking table? And I don't see that. So that makes it hard to determine how I would try to rank, item 2 as opposed to the others, and not knowing how high. I mean, if it's number 1 on the list, and you can say that right now, well, then, no question, yeah, it belongs there. But the question's in my mind, where is it on that table?
You want to start with that one?
Yeah. Hey, Mig, it's Robert. So
Hey, Robert.
it is number one on our list. If you remember the first study that we did, I think it was about 2018. So that was the original rankings, and those were based off of about 5 years previous.
Oh,
Thi-
yeah.
This street has now come to the forefront of main breaks. So just in the last couple of years, I think our count, when we did the count, it was up to 11 main breaks on that one section of La Cañada.
Got it. Okay.
It has moved itself up to the top pretty rapidly.
All right. Thank you for that.
So, yeah, so that's the third point I got. Back to the first, when you were talking about potentially returning the savings, and I really probably should have started with that. That actually was one of the options presented to the board last week. It was last week. And so really when we had that discussion, here's kind of the idea coming out of that discussion was we wanted to bring E&O some potential options because there was how about an option of accelerating a capital project? So we wanted to allow you to weigh in on which project would you like to propose. It doesn't take the refund off of the table. It just gives the board, the board wanted to see some options. So basically it's if we want to do a project, and that's why I tried to give you, and it is La Cañada is the number one on the list and most immediate in our CIP. So I think it provides the most benefit and on both ends of that. But to be honest, you could pull up any rehab replacement, pick a spot in the district and we've got a project. I just wanted to give some at least some varying ideas on, hey, I'd like to see us do something that improves water quality. Just some options there. Obviously we could go through a lot of these. But that is, so really the three things we were looking at was, kind of a one-time or a one-time rebate to, back to the ratepayers.
Yeah. And that number, 768, 800 over, 8,400, say, services, that's about 90, 91, 92 bucks.
Yeah.
So it isn't a huge number, but pretty much pretty close to a C note.
When the staff put together a chart, Mig, looking at all of the meter sizes in our district and the quantity of them and trying to comply with the proposition about allocating cost of service and so forth.
Sure.
The typical single family homeowner with a 3/4 or a 5/8 inch meter was going to get about $40-something. And a grower, one of the big growers was talking about he had a bill of almost $10,000 and he was going to get 200. So one of the things mentioned was that it's free money, but it's just really, it is not going to have a major impact on any of our classes to give a single homeowner $42 one-time credit or a $200 credit to a guy that's looking at 10 grand a month. And so what would be, and that triggered a conversation about, well, what alternatives could we do beyond a refund to ratepayers?
Yeah, I understand.
Are you with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I understand. I was making a case for the ratepayer.
Yeah. So the idea was that we'd bring kind of the project discussion here. Next week at budget and finance, we'll be talking about some other things. And then at communication and customer service, talking about, well, if you want to do the rebate, would it be better 1 month or do you want to stretch it over several months? And trying to get like kind of the committees to weigh in on each of these. And so that there's, maybe not consensus, but there's some feedback coming to the board for them to make the decision. So that was really the idea.
I had one question left on item 4, the generators. Did we do any pre-work in the design? For example, did we put a transfer switch in the current system so we could roll up with a portable generator and not spend all the money on a big permanent generator building?
I'll let Chad or Malik go into the details or Robert, whoever wants to.
I can speak to that.
There was a spot put out for, basically they graded a pad. So there is a location for it. As far as the equipment, Chad, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, great question. Each pump station is fully equipped with hookups for generators. So in the event we have a generator, whether it's a rental or it's a tow behind or a permanent, it is plug and play.
Plug and play, right?
Great.
Yeah,
That's
the
smart
other,
design.
tidbit on the grant funding, we mentioned it's potential grant funding. There's no set source out there
Yeah.
that's just looming or that we're anticipating. So it's just recognizing that these types of grants have come up in the past. Frankly, with the state budget situation, I don't foresee anything in the near future, so it'd be limited to federal funding. And there might be one potential option, but I don't want it to seem like it's likely it's gonna happen within a couple of years. If
No.
we're waiting for grant funding, we may be waiting a while.
No, I didn't want to get hung up on item 4, but it sounds like you built in an alternative
Hmm.
to provide it if needed for very little cost. So at one time, didn't you have portable generators?
We
We have one, but
One.
not of this size.
Not, okay.
Yeah, these pumps are much larger,
But you could rent
potentially.
short-term, month or two if you needed.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Preference would be to have a permanent standby, because the rentals, it just takes time, and sometimes
Yeah.
time is of the essence
But-
trying to get those out there, but yeah.
In terms comparing it to La Canada, it's got to be down on the list.
Well, I think like Mig said, we have a potential, well, not a potential exact source identified, but these are the type of projects that have been funded in the past. The other ones, I think, a much lower probability that you would get a pipeline replacement or the water quality project, any kind of significant grant funding for something like that.
So I'm circling back to Carrie. Because we've discussed a lot of things here. We've discussed change orders to the pump station projects. We've discussed alternative uses of the 700 and something thousand we've talked about. And we postponed the discussion of item 9 in order to have the discussion of item 9A. And as we go through all of this, I think where I am is, are we proposing to provide advice to the board on whether the budget should be amended and increased? Or is this really a conversation about what is the source of funds for a budget increase of 1.15 million? What
Yeah,
are we doing here?
Well, here, what we're asking for a recommendation to increase the budget for the pump station project. The source of funding, whether that come from budget and finance, which could be additional discussion there. Ultimately lies with the board on where exactly
Mhm.
those funds come from. There really isn't a whole lot of options. We could go and look at some cuts, but I think the primary options so anyways, that's the action we're looking for just to be clear on that, right? We wanted to bring this, hey, we've got this overage, we've got this omission that we need to cover. And so we want to bring that to E&O and say, hey, in order to complete the project, we need this budget amendment. Again, we're providing some options are, aside from anything else, aside from taking money from over here, taking money from over here, which, again, we can look at the option that lies in front of us is we have financing available to cover the remainder of the pump station. We financed the great portion of it. This would complete that financing as part of the exit fee financing. And again, kind of budget neutral to what we had proposed when we started going through this fiscal year.
And if we did that, if we follow that line of reasoning, then we do not need to make any cuts in the capital program. We would not need to make any cuts in the operations budget, and we would still have the $768,800 walking around money that we need to figure out what we're going to do with it, right? Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
The board could always decide if we just say, go along with the 1.15 million, which is what you want. We should have to do that.
Yeah.
They would say, we're going to take the 768 from that to partially finance it, or they could say, do the 3.2 million extra loan amounts, not our problem.
Absolutely correct. There are a couple options on how to do this.
Have the change orders that make up the 1.15 million, have they already been approved by the board or by you if they fall within your
Mm.
statutory authority?
The ones that Chad detailed, yes, there are pending change orders that we've put in there that we anticipate coming forward.
But the two change orders we discussed have already been approved.
And they totaled the 398?
Correct.
And there are other change orders that we are anticipating but have not yet received?
We are in negotiations with the contractor as we speak.
Close to 500,000 sales tax.
Right.
I feel like a fish out of water here. Normally, well, I tell you what, it's normally what we have seen in the past
Mhm.
is when a change order needed to go to the board, the change order was brought to us as a bundle, as a thing,
Mhm.
as a tangible thing that had a beginning and a middle and an end and had a price tag on it. And it was brought to us and in approving the change order, if it caused the project budget to be exceeded, then there was a ancillary piece of that said, and we need to lift the project budget from $100 to $110.
Right.
All right. And I'm not feeling like this
Well-
feels different to me in some way.
Well, you have a piece of that in front of you, right? The piece of that is the change orders that are pending, right? That's one line item. But the other, as mentioned, the other piece is the sales tax,
Sales
which
tax.
really makes that number pop, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Jake, could I try and offer some clarification?
Sure.
Clint, what you were saying makes perfect sense, and I think we might just be, I don't know, but it might just be semantics. This is not requesting approval of a change order. This is requesting an increase of allocation of funds to the overall budget. The change orders were within the general manager signing limit, and in the past, things like this would go to the mid-year budget adjustment, but with the timing of this project, that is too far out. Therefore, the board needs to take action, as Jake has said, to finish the project. So we're not dissecting change orders. We're asking for an increased allocation to the overall project budget because mid-year we
To
we
fund
can't.
change orders that already have been approved and were within Jake's authority. And we just need to come up with the dough to make them operational so that the checks can get cut. Is that where we are?
That is correct.
Well, and the budget amendment in total requires a board action.
Right.
So that's, yeah.
I'm still struggling with the amounts in the change orders and the sales tax. And then the difference between the 1.15 and those numbers, it's like 200,000. So that's not real clear to me still.
I mean, I don't know exactly where those numbers are coming from, but I know there's additional staff time in there. I think that was a part of that budget.
Yeah, it's hard to explain other than because this wasn't a total project budget, looking from the beginning, here are all the line items we need to spend. Like we were talking about, we need to move to. The way the 3.4, which is the budget for this year, that's the active part of the discussion, was made was this last spring, looking at, we're at this point in time, let's say April, looking forward, what left do we have to spend on the contract balances? And at that point, that was 3.4. And so that didn't account for change orders, SDG, and all these other things that weren't just plain and simple contract balances with maybe a little bit of contingency. And so it's hard because it was a one point in time look forward and there were invoices in play. And so it's just not going to be exact in the same way as starting from the beginning to go, here's each line item that we're projecting. So we were able to determine that the vast majority of that difference from the point in time when we looked forward saying we needed 3.4 to now were those essentially those two major items, the sales tax and then these change orders that we didn't know about in the spring. And then there's miscellaneous other things that feed into that make up the difference.
SDG&E and these others, right? Yeah. And that's why we tried to give, I know the one spreadsheet shows the entire project budget, and that was, we were trying to reconcile these two things because really we're talking about a fiscal year budget that's low based on a couple of, the items that we've talked about for the most part. But then you have just this overall project budget and trying to give you the full picture of that as well.
I think we need to approve the 1.15 million. How it's funded is the board's prerogative.
The board will have some discretion in that, correct?
Well, we're not approving it, we're recommending.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and then the how is a different committee's job.
Right.
And maybe it might help a little bit, Director Dale. So if you look at 1.15, over 500,000 is sales tax, 400,000 is change orders. And then I think it was over 100,000 was SDG&E accelerated work. This was nighttime work and overtime. So that was
65. I think it was only 65 or 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that takes a chunk of that remaining couple 100,000 and then miscellaneous other things on top of it.
I would recommend that be added in the description before it goes to the board because it's not
Doesn't
clear.
balance. It's kind of murky,
Yeah.
kind of murky.
It's really hard to follow.
See, what you just did, Rick, was very followable. All right. Here we just have a lot of numbers blended and, like I said, it was not clear to me if we were being asked to approve change orders, if we were passed improve budget increase, or are we being asked to recommend approval of source of funds for budget increase? It's not clear. And your explanation just now was very cogent. And, this whole calendar item could probably be reduced down to half its size if we simply listed 498,000. Well, there's actually two pieces that add to four, but change order 1, change order 2, sales tax hiccup, miscellaneous SDG&E, and it adds up to 1.15 million. And life is good. And that makes sense, I think. And I think it would just be a better presentation. That's just my.
Rick,
Yeah.
Rick, could I recommend potentially converting that into a waterfall visual that does that walk to show exactly that?
Yeah. See what we can do.
We'll try to simplify it. I think the idea was we were trying to provide actually a lot of detail on where each of these categories, what remaining funds we have to pay. And so we were trying to give you dissect it. I think that was the engineering team's kind of attempt to dissect it for you really well, but understanding it'd be nice just to kind of boil it down to maybe just 4 different items, right? This is the big one. Here's another big one. And there's some miscellaneous staff time in that makes up the balance. So we can definitely simplify it. So it's a little more understandable, easy to follow.
Well, I mean, I'm okay approving the 1.15. It's the fiscal impact and how it's being paid for that I feel like we were told one thing about the tax exempt financing at the last meeting, and this is different. So I have some issues with it changing a little bit, or maybe it's not changing and it's just written in a way that it looks like it's changing. But I think I'm not comfortable with the fiscal impact as it's written.
Well, that's,
here.
we got, of course, the budget and finance meeting and the board meeting to discuss, but really it comes down to the debt.
Yeah.
But it's not different than the number we wanted to. And again, the action at the board was just to reserve the option to finance the other 3.2.
Up to the 15.8,
Correct.
which is in there. I didn't know the 3.2 was going to be reimbursed. Was that the original intent all along to reimburse?
That's what was presented at the board last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But obviously, there's still, I mean, we're gonna talk through those things, but that is to cover these things in a way that kind of maintains the plan that we set out on, that is going to be
Mhm.
the,
I'd like to make a motion. I would like to move that consistent with the jurisdiction of this committee, that this calendar item be rewritten and submitted to the board with the recommendation that the 4 or 5 items of increased expenses be listed and categorized,
Mhm.
and that this committee recommend that the board approve the increase of the budget for those amounts. And the conversation about source of funds and so forth will be a calendar item at the finance committee next week to have some conversation and to provide advice on that. But I think the jurisdiction of this committee is pretty much limited to, are we comfortable agreeing to a $1.15 million budget for this project? And you could list the 4 or 5 key components of that in the calendar item if you rewrote it. Would that?
Yeah.
Would that motion have a second?
I'll second.
And Mig, are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so that means, is there any discussion or can we go to a roll call vote on that?
Vote.
No discussion. So go ahead, Therese.
Member McKesson,
Aye.
Member Marnett,
Aye.
Member Dale.
Aye.
Member Nelson,
I,
Member Gasca.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is unanimously carried.
and
And
uniquely.
I stand ready to, if you would like, on behalf of the committee, if you would like for me to look at a draft or at some point, when you guys redo this thing, just to be sure that it's consistent with the theme of what we're doing, I'd be happy to put eyes on it real quick at some point, if that works for you. If not, you know. And so that completes our work on item 9. It does not complete our work on 9A unless, I don't believe 9A was asking this committee for a recommendation. Is that right? You were just briefing us? An
Not,
information item?
not necessarily. I think moving something forward, if there is a desire to, if there's something that really sticks out in those options, that you'd like to say, hey, I think we should do this with those funds, you can defer it to the board. But if, that was the intent, hey, here's some options that we could, doesn't mean that option is going to be selected because there's other options beyond that. But if
Right.
there is a project you really love and say, I'd like to see this get done this fiscal year, then that would be, that's what we were asking.
Well, I will just speak right up and say that La Cañada just shines like sunshine to me. It's the right price. It's obviously a great candidate. And it gets us back on a replacement horse that we need, that we have fallen off of. And I would love to see us get back on it. And so that's just my independent standalone view. That'd be my preference. The refund, I love the idea of giving money back to the ratepayers, but I think that to some extent, the amount per ratepayer or per meter is going to be so trivial that they're going to look at us and say, that's it? That's my refund?
Well,
That's
Flint, and
it?
also it's a one-time, so
Yeah.
there's no shelf life, right?
And-
By the next bill. you've
Well,
got-
even if you split it up into 4, 5, or 6 payments, now we're down to $8 a month for 10 months. I mean, or for 5, 6 months.
Yeah.
Crisis of unfulfilled expectations there, I think. And I'm not sure that I see the value. I think we would provide more value to the ratepayer if we fixed a pipeline that was breaking and breaking and breaking and breaking and causing tons of damage and spending money and just stuff. So
And again, yeah, the board just asked for options. So this is really just saying, hey, if we were going to do a project, this is what we think is the best one. And
what do other members of the committee think?
I like the Canada pipeline, provided the board wants to spend the money at all.
Yeah.
That would be my priority, to
Perfect.
spend it on that.
Is there from staff any implied prioritization in the way this list was put together?
Not necessarily. I mean, these all have different impacts to the district. I mean, from a staff's perspective, to be quite honest, feel like, I mean, our operations staff would love to have those water quality improvements, and the generator. They're all very high priority projects. I think we tend to agree, though, that accelerating a pipeline project might be in our best interest. These are the things that cause havoc within our district. And I agree with Flynn. I think we need to get back on that horse. And so if we were going to do this, I think that would be a good one. And we'll work on the rest, obtaining funding or through CIP.
Because item 3 and 4 is currently being, call it manually managed or with additional labor. It
Very
can-
carefully managed.
Carefully
Yes,
managed.
carefully managed.
And that's not ideal, but it's
Yeah.
workable. Whereas the Law Canada can't manage that one.
No, it does what it wants.
Carrie, you're wrinkled up over there. I can see those little wheels just grinding in there.
I don't know.
What's on your mind?
I don't have a comment.
I know something's going on in there.
So we're happy to take forward that as one of the options. That's all it'll be. This was the proposal. Maybe do a project. Here's the project option.
Would it be safe to say, committee members, that if the board chose to spend it on a capital project, that this committee would be supportive of the La Cañada pipeline replacement? Would that be a fair statement?
That's fair.
And
Yeah.
because the overage offset is really not a jurisdiction of this committee, item 1.
Yeah, sure.
That's a finance. The other 2 would be capital projects of some type, 3 and 4 would be. And I think it would be safe to say that of the capital projects that are available and clear and present, this committee would prefer to see the La Cañada project above the others. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah.
Do we need to vote on that?
I don't think so. I think we can move forward with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, you can move forward with that. Okay. Okie dokie. Item 10, tank maintenance contract update. And I see, Chad, we got a handout here.
We do. So this is an update on the tank maintenance contract. If you recall, maintenance contract goes back to 2003. So we've been at this a long time with USG via several different parent companies, but USG Water is who holds the contract and has been maintaining our tanks. If you recall, the biggest issue was really the tank interiors we felt were being deferred beyond what we felt was kind of standard of care. We felt like there was several tanks that were in need and they weren't in their schedule for multiple years. And so we had taken that was our biggest issue. We had taken the item to the board and proposed to actually cancel the contract or send a notice of cancellation of the contract, and which we did. We sent that, I think it was in August, September, sometime around there. There was a 90-day window that we had to do before we had to get that in before December. We did at the time indicate that if they wanted to, if we wanted to negotiate changes to the contract amendments, we would be open to that and kind of let them know exactly what our issues were with it. So we've been working with them over the last month or so, and basically what they've come back with is, I would call it a recovery schedule on the tank interiors. And so, but to be quite honest, it provides a lot of value to the district. What they're proposing is to do 2 tanks a year over the next 4 years. These are still subject to us meeting with them, and I think it's appropriate, because as you continue to inspect these tanks and that, things, it every single year you might move one up and move one back as, as new details come to light. So I think it's appropriate. The one I think that's really set in stone is 2025. They're planning on doing that and starting that in January. Hutton, and I think we had shown you some pictures of Hutton, which is really in need of an interior recoat. They're projecting to start that in January. And then Rainbow Heights, which is another one that's been it's been quite a while since it's been done, in March. And then you can see from there on the kind of the tanks in succession to really this brings all of our tanks back to a very serviceable level over these next 4 years. Just to give you an idea of what we had in the CIP budget, we had proposed, and it wasn't going to start for a year or so, but we had these tanks, staggered into our CIP budget, and these interiors typically end up costing, for us to go out and contract and, and we're paying profit and all those kind of different things. You're looking at these 4 million gallon tanks, somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000, somewhere in there to coat these tanks. It depends on how you do it and what kind of, do you get a good quality bid or not? I mean, there's plus or minus in there, but so there's a lot of value provided by this accelerated schedule. They've not requested any amendment as far as payment on the contract. The original contract has a they can raise the contract price, but it's capped at 5% per year. Or I think it's actually 15% over 3 years. So about 5% per year that they can add to the contract value. But I think, extending or not canceling this contract and moving forward with the schedule provided actually provides much more value to the district than it would be otherwise. And so anyway, so this is where we landed. Again, as the years go on, that was something that they wanted to do was, hey, let's make sure the process is a little bit better moving forward too. That was kind of their commitment to us, that kind of I don't know if it's a lack of communication, but not having a set meeting where we come together every year and go, hey, let's look at the inspection reports, throw them out on the table. Why are we deferring this for 2 years and not this one, and doing those kind of things? So those are really kind of the main amendments to the contract, is that we're going to, basically there's an annual meeting to determine the scope of work for the following year. And then this is the schedule for the next 4 years, which really puts us back exactly where we wanted to be. And so really staff is looking at this. Is it perfect? Probably not. But there's really a lot of value to this contract, or extending this contract. And again, we still reserve the right on an annual basis to go, if they're not performing, then we can move in a different direction. So on a year-to-year basis, we can still do that. There's no, they haven't asked for us to, okay, you have to commit to the next 10 years for us to do this schedule or anything. So I think there's, anyways, we just feel there's a lot of value in this, and we're, our recommendation is really to continue with USG under this schedule, and obviously on an annual basis, we monitor performance to get us back to where we need to be on these tank interiors.
And so they would do soup to nuts, just like they have up to now. They would, because there were some aspects of their work that we really did not have a problem with, right? The sort of the exterior cleanings and a few things. They will continue doing that, just business as usual. And what we're going to get here is 2 tank cleanings.
Interior
Interior
recoatings.
Well,
Yeah.
More than a cleaning.
Yep, that's more than a
Yeah.
cleaning. That's
Mhm.
that's a rehab or a update, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
And all of this, there is no additional contract cost asked of us at this point.
That's correct. They have the right to increase by that 5%. So it just, it's the same contract.
Right.
Yeah. Same contract language for the increases like before.
So
Okay,
what,
the only question I have is, you delineate 8 tank cleanings. Do you have 4 that are in good condition and that's why they're not on the list?
Correct. There's actually 6 that we identified that we felt had been deferred too long. But then on the back end of the schedule, those ones are starting to get into that 10, 12-year window. And so those ones got added into. The others, correct, are, they've been done in the last, say, within the last 8 years. And so they're in okay shape, or, 6, 7 years probably.
Personally, this sounds like a really good outcome, and not only from a financial perspective, but also I was just a little concerned about us taking on some of these additional duties in-house.
Yep.
Robert's crew not having any additional staffing associated with it, and I don't know how much time, how many man hours it'd take to do the exterior cleanings and all the other stuff aside from the big kahunas that we have to do. And seems like this is be a good thing for us. And my only thought is we just should have had this conversation sooner with these boys. That's
Maybe we appreciate you pushing on, hey, try to negotiate this. And so, yeah, I think I tend to agree. I think this turned out pretty well. It was a very cooperative discussion.
Are you asking this committee to take any action at this time, or is this an information item?
We would love your recommendation, because we're going to take this to the board to amend the contract.
What specific elements are in here to not let history repeat itself?
Well, I think,
Because
yeah.
part of the reason we got here is there were expectations that weren't met. So therefore we gave notification of non-renewal. Now they're back and with a catch-up plan, but what kind of teeth or performance non-negotiable deliverables do we have to not repeat?
Yeah, what really our response continues to be, we have annual right to cancel the contract. And so if there is any period of non-performance, that's obviously that is the, that's how we respond.
But that means though that there was enough non-conformance that we canceled. So we're actually negative in that they didn't deliver on something.
Right.
Therefore, so is there any kind of any teeth in this?
Yeah, well, I think, from their perspective, they, they kind of came back to us with, we had never communicated this before, right? Hey, we're still responsible for fixing the tanks, no matter what, whether we do it now or whether we do it in 3 years, we're still responsible. And so, yeah, basically it just never brought to them that, well, that's, we're responsible for making sure these tanks last over their lifetime. And so we want to see a more proactive approach to these interior tanks. Again, they've committed to it. They've given us a schedule, and that's where we sit. But you're right. I think on an annual basis, we have to assess, performance on the contract and decide.
Yeah. So is that schedule part of the commitment in the contract?
Well, as you'll see, it's non-binding as far as the exact tanks that they're going to do.
Okay.
So, and that really allows for that flexibility. That's why we didn't push back too hard on that, non-binding in that. But I can just tell you, if they come back and go, hey, we're actually not going to do the 2 tanks, we're going to do 1, then we're going to end the contract. I mean, that is the teeth that we've got.
I would also add, this was a huge eye-opening to USG. Getting the letter served, and then we had several in-person meetings with them. They took this extremely seriously. I think for a decade plus, this was on autopilot for them. This was an automatic thing. And when the district issued the notice to terminate, there was some very serious discussions. The schedule was heavily vetted on both ends, but they made it very clear they do not want to lose this contract, and they do not want to have another meeting that we started this whole negotiation process with. So I think that vested interest came to light. And as Flint said, we probably could have had that conversation a few years earlier.
So assuming that we're feeling relatively good about this, are we adequately protected in the original source contract documents because this is like an addendum. That's what it's called.
is.
It's an addendum. And it is an addendum which deals with a part of the scope of work, which is the targets
Yes.
we're gonna go after. Are we properly protected in the original contract documents in terms of the scope of work of what a proper interior cleaning / rehab is? Are we adequately protected in that type of scope? I have no idea. I've never seen the contract. I mean, what if they just went in there and they spray washed a little bit and mopped the floor and walked out and said, we're done here, and we did the interior? Would we be protected?
Well,
We have a scope of work that protects us?
I don't believe there's a detailed scope of work on, you know, their exact means and methods on how they're going to conduct the recoats. So, you know,
Robert, what do you think, man? This is your neck of the woods. You understand my concern,
I
right?
totally
Yeah.
understand your.
I mean, they're committing to spend 1.6 to 1.7 or 8 million bucks a year now on interior things, doing 2 a year at 800 a copy, right? Roughly. And so,
I think probably internally they can probably shave those costs just because they're not, you know, I mean, it's a
Okay.
contract. They do it internally, you know.
you know,
they
I
can
just
turn-
worry
So
than
that
what we're.
there-
paying.
we're going to suddenly have
There's
a
industry
substantial increase in the amount of cash that they're pouring in to this client. And therefore, there is always the possibility of a little skimping and sliding and
So there's industry standards for
Yeah.
for recoating. And I think in this case for these tanks, part of what triggered this is Steve and I, the operations supervisor, started looking into these tanks instead of just relying on the reports that they were publishing. Like, let's go and take a look inside. And it was interesting when they first gave the schedule, we in the meetings had conversations with them saying, well, how did you guys come to this schedule when we've seen the inside of those tanks and we have a different variation of this schedule? And we had a conversation with them about that. And they said, there was some back and forth, and okay, well, we'll get back to you. And then they came back with our schedule. So I think they're realizing that we're now paying attention to what they're doing. So when you ask what are the guarantees, there's an industry standard. I don't know what it is specifically for how thick the coating has to be, but we also have interior pictures before now that we took where we would compare to afterward. So the interior coating process, they go in, they sandblast the whole interior, right? Any metal that's so far corroded that it just can't be, like, you just can't paint over it because it's just falling apart. They actually have to replace that metal. So not only will it be inspected, but we're also going to be part of that inspection to verify that it's getting done. And I think Jake's dead on. If they come back and they say, well, we can only do one tank, they're jeopardizing a huge contract. And I think, as Chad was saying, they realized they were going to lose this contract, that we were knee deep in it and we weren't happy. And they brought out some heavy hitters from back east to understand what the issues were and resolve those issues with us and give us some guarantees that we are the ones driving this train, not them. Because that was one of the concerns we had, right? I mean, they need to make money. So the less work they do, the more money they make. It makes sense. But that was one of the conversations we had again, was who's driving this train?
And I think historically our issue hasn't been the quality of the work. It's just been the deferring of
Right.
these interiors. That has been the issue. Yeah.
I'm confident after the meetings we've had and the conversations of where we're at right now, they'll follow through with this schedule and we'll get what we need to get out of these tanks to get them rehabbed.
I share your view that they probably would not have put that schedule in front of your face if they didn't intend to carry it out.
Right.
And so my only concern was, what's the quality of the work that they're going to do? And are they going to cut some corners and then put you in a position where you have to either decide between whether you're going to, big difference when you're terminating a contract and it's for cause versus convenience.
Right.
And the burden of proof is very significant for cause generally, and convenience, you would tend to possibly owe them for lost profits. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And I just want to be sure that we are technically grounded, that if we say this is not good, what you're proposing to do in this condition, in this piece, that we have firm footing, that that what we say is in accordance with an industry standard that can be quickly pulled up and referred to,
Yeah.
something that gives us
There,
standing.
there's another component to this. The longer that they defer, the more expensive it gets for them to do the repairs, right? So
Understand.
the more metal that corrodes. Now, so instead of just going in and sandblasting the old paint, a little bit of rust and do a recoat, now you're actually replacing I-beams. Very expensive. And you can't hide that, right? You can't hide metal that's
Mhm.
just delaminating.
Right.
So the onus is on them to stay on top of this as well to the greatest extent possible. So they're trying to balance their profit margin to not let it get so bad where it costs them over the top, right? Where they're losing money on doing the repair. We're trying to balance it in the sense what we know as professionals, hey, this tank needs to be a priority over that tank.
And-
We've also gotten them now to work with us to take these tanks out of service in the wintertime. When I first started here, they were giving us the schedule. So during the summertime, we had tanks out of service. And we came in and said, that's going to stop now. So if you look at the schedule, you notice they're all in the winter months. So I think we're in a good spot with them right now.
But it would seem like though, it would be nice if we had an addendum to the addendum that says these industry standards are called out, or they type out what they believe cleaning the tank consists of and make it part of the contract. It's not, they should be able to do it in an instant. They should have a list of what they,
Is the standards
do.
we follow. I
Right.
think
They
that's
could
fair
add
request. That's
to
a
the
fair request.
contract.
And I think you just amend this. I
Yeah.
mean, just produce a new one of these that has the schedule and the appropriate reference or whatever, as Bob is referring to.
either way, either industry standard or this is what we do when we clean the tank and in the detail that they normally do it. And
Yeah.
then at least you got a little more footing to argue. That's all.
I like
Like
that.
it.
Otherwise,
a
I
lot.
completely agree with the contract.
Any other comments from committee members?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking for it, but I'm not finding it. Did we do any changes to the operating budget, assuming that it was coming in-house?
We did. We did.
I can't find what those are, but I think that needs to be discussed in
I
there.
remember that. Yes, we did, Carrie. I think they were talking about exterior cleanings and something else, right?
We assumed this contract would only be half the year.
Okay.
And so there's another half the year that's not in the budget that we'll end up paying. But we also assumed in the longer term CIP that we'd have all of these projects on the CIP and all of those would get wiped off. And so in
Yeah.
the net over the 5 years, it's positive. For our current year fiscal budget, it'll look a little bit negative, maybe 400,000 or 500,000. But holistically, this is very good financially.
Yeah, I did see in the CIP that there were 3 projects, the first occurring. I
Just in
had
the-
it up here and I
yeah.
don't have it anymore, but for maybe Hutton tank. And it was 1 or 2 years out, but it was a total of about 3.1
Mhm.
over a 5-year period. So I would like to see that in the fiscal impact associated with the contract too, to remove those from the CIP.
Okay. Yeah, those were in out years, but yeah.
Okay.
And some of these, to be quite honest, I think we're out beyond the 5-year, but they were
I'm
really,
sure that-
but they were really close because
Yeah.
we were kind of spreading things out to try to, to try to get there. But so basically we get the work accelerated.
Yeah, it looked like there were
Yeah.
only 3 tanks over the 5-year period. So this is a win for the district too, getting a lot more 8 tanks done.
Right.
Anything else, Carrie?
No.
So can I make a proposed motion? And that would be that the motion would be that this committee recommends the board approve the contract amendment that we have in front of us, augmented by 2 things. First, that the contract amendment include reference to technical standards or provisions that help to guarantee that the quality of work is appropriate for what we want. And secondly, outside the contract amendment, but recommend that the board instruct staff to eliminate from the CIP program at any point references to performing this, any or all of this work in-house. That we tune that up. Is that-
And then a review of whatever operating was changed. I'd just like a refresh on what we said,
Okay.
what we talked about. I think that would be helpful.
So that's a motion. And a second,
I'll second.
okay. Therese? Roll call?
Yes. Member McKesson,
Aye.
member Marnet,
Aye.
member Dale,
All right.
member Nelson,
Aye.
member Gasca,
Aye.
motion's unanimous.
Okay, unanimously carried. We trust that all of that will get translated into the proper paperwork going to the board, but we hope. That gets us to item number 11, pump station commissioning progress update. I'm guessing there's a person in this room that has been waiting a very long time to give that.
And he's got 1 minute.
And he has,
Can you do it?
Is
in 1
it
minute?
supposed to go to only 3?
and has in,
Oh, I was like,
and unfortunately, you've had to endure discussions on a number of topics that probably you just didn't need to have
No,
today, but
it's really cool.
okay. Go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
Good afternoon, committee members. Like Robert mentioned earlier, I'm Steve Pop, the operations supervisor. And yeah, I wanted to give a kind of a high level, just give a high level overview of the commissioning of the 3 new EFI pump stations. So we'll just get right into it. So if you look at the screen, I guess the screen back here as well. So this picture here, this rendering, just to probably already know, but just a little, pump station to tank flow, path. So you can see in red, the West Lilac pump station. That's I'd say general location, but that's actually pretty exact location where it's located. And then that's going to Hutton Tank, the Hutton Zone. You see Rancho Amigos to the south in green, that goes to Turner Tank. And then the Dentro de Lomas to the west, and then the blue line that its design spec was to pump to Turner Tank. This I'll get into a little more of the specifics of all this you see on the left there in later slides, but the initial thing when operations staff began the commissioning was simple as it sounds. It's just the power startup, bump testing the pumps, just making sure that the rotation was correct and all the power was there from SDG&E. And once we confirmed that, which they all were, we just went into subsequent just station testing, valves, isolation valves, the pumps with the control valves, the clay valve, which are the control valves for the pumps. Kind of electrical SCADA communications is all kind of wrapped into one, but just, testing for make sure electrical was making it to the components. SCADA was working via remote to the stations, and then that also ties in with the communications itself. And covered up there, but that's, generator testing. I have actually a few photos here of each, just, you already saw with some of the photos that Jake presented earlier. You've seen them. All the pump stations, virtually look the same, just different sizes. Some of them are smaller, but the same, color scheme, they're all the same. This particular one's West Lilac, and then the picture to the right is basically they're all identical with the same VFD controlled variable frequency drive. They all have that same ability to where we can control it there in hand. And they're pretty much all the same. So there was no need to show them each. Here's the other side, Dentro de Lomas. You can see basically the same thing, just smaller off to the left that you can't see. And I apologize, these photos are a little older, that, a couple of weeks ago from the when construction, they look a little different now, just a little more further along. But off to the left where you can't see, that would be the spot where you could put a mobile generator if you were to rent one. So here, Rancho Amigos, again, you've seen similar photo in an earlier presentation. The building at the top of the photo is where you have the control room and the pumps. And then the building to the left with the doors open is where this 900 kW generator is housed. And before I get into the actual commissioning testing, just since I'm on this photo, we did test run this station with the generator, it was able to power 2 pumps, no problem. It started up fine and, it ran the pumps, we're pumping water. And so that was a great success. And it really brings a nice added, redundancy or safety factor per se, because now we have a station that can run during exactly what we said, a power safety shut off that could happen the next day or two. So we did do that.
Will these be tested yearly at least, the generator with the whole system?
They recommend, so we just had in part of that testing was with the Kohler reps, and they recommend once a month.
Okay.
For 15 minutes to half an hour. Now, that particular generator has a kind of built-in load bank.
So you don't have to kick it online, so to speak,
No,
with the.
but
pumps.
they do want us to test it under load, so technically kind of are.
Okay. And the other question is, why 2 pump stations for 1 tank on down at Turner?
I had that
Am I
question.
reading this wrong?
So actually, I was kind of going to get into that a little bit here, but just answer that. So that was the design spec originally, is because West Lilac, as you know, it's a larger station because the Hutton zone inherently it has a certain amount of demand that we already know. So that's why it's already a larger station, because it has the pipeline that can support that. Dentro and Rancho Amigos were designed to work in conjunction with each other simultaneously, because we couldn't get either one site to get the specific flow capacity that we would need. So we had to build 2 smaller ones in different
Oh, that's
areas.
due to smaller pipelines
Yes.
going into where the pump station is?
Yep.
Okay.
So in on this pump station, so as you can read here, so to our, I don't want to, I guess, use the word surprise, but just something that was good that we know. Let me back up a little bit. Apologize. In on these tests, operations staff, we methodically, started at one station, and we hold on, look at my note here, make sure I'm not ahead of myself. Yeah. So we methodically test ran each pump one at a time at each station. And then, after, okay, 1, 2, 3 is good. Then went back, ran 2 at a time. And that's how the procedure went with each station. And then eventually getting to a point where we ran 1 pump at each station all simultaneously. So it was definitely it was a multi-day process that we methodically planned out. And, in with that, we had operations staff that was strategically placed in various locations, monitoring discharge, suction pressure, all of that stuff. And the pressures that we saw were within the flow modeling that we've already kind of expected. But as you see there, one thing that was interesting is that we virtually achieved station flow or designed flow at each station with 2 pumps out of 3. So that's nice that we originally thought we might have to run 3 to get a certain flow. We only need to run 2. So now that leaves us the 3rd pump for redundancy, and that we can actually cycle through the pumps instead of just relying on 3 every night. So that was something that's nice, that now we can run in a little more comfortable fashion. During the testing, there was no main breaks or water quality issues during the operations testing. So that was nice. Not saying we're expecting water quality calls, but we didn't get any, so it was great. So this is an operational bonus. So like I mentioned earlier, it was designed for Dentro and Rancho Amigos to run simultaneously, and it will run in that fashion. But this is also due in part to construction, which ESO, I'm sure, is getting into his presentation, but they were working on a pipeline. Once that pipeline was completed, we system operators were able to do some valve manipulation, and we ran a test to pump using the Dentro de Lomas pump station. We were successfully able to pump into Gopher Tank. It's at a slight reduced capacity as when it's helping into Turner, but it's a major benefit, and because now we can move water with that kind of not originally designed station into that most southern tank, and we're actually operating in that fashion as we speak. So that was kind of a nice operational perk, if you want to put it. Again, allows for more options and redundancy.
I think just to interrupt you real quick, just take you back to the beginning. We originally planned for a pump station at the Weiss water treatment plant that was going to pump into Gopher, and there were some issues with other agencies as part of detachment and whatnot. Not with Oceanside, they were all in on it. So we had to find an alternative. So Steve and his guys came up with an alternative to put a temporary pump up at the Turner tank site. So for the last 6 months, we've been using that temporary trailer. It has some pumps on the trailer to pump water basically from Turner all the way to Gopher. And it's been successful. We had to get temporary power brought in and whatnot. So as part of this commissioning internal talks, we said, well, let's try and see if Dentro can pump to Gopher, because then maybe we don't need that temporary pump skid up at Turner that we have. So they did some valving, and yeah, that was kind of a cool moment when that worked out for us.
So kind of a little internal fact, as you put it, but a week before the November 1st deadline. And so operations staff, was operating it, and then it being online a week ahead of time of the deadline, when this was due in part to, multiple departments of Rainbow staff, the contractor and SDG&E help, moving everything along. So, but the implementation of these new pump stations, they haven't, I don't want to say they've introduced unique challenges. I mean, as I have written there, but operations staff, we're learning more and more every day. I mean, it's in its infancy, and but it's nothing that we haven't overcome. So we're handling up, successfully resolving the problems. System operators are currently running the stations and learning and developing ideal pumping strategies as we speak. So like this screenshot right here, I took from this morning, and that is actual. So I know there's a lot going on there, but if you look at the kind of the three, where Med has the mouse like there, Dentro de Lomas, Rancho, West Lilac. So I mean, those are live. This morning, the current system operator on hand that was controlling this, he has set those VFDs to do what he wanted to do. So I mean, as you could see by the three red SD 11, 3, and 6, those are the water authority connections. They're red, so they're off. So we haven't received a drop of water from them since 7 or 8 days ago, and strictly off the pump station. So it's kind of in conclusion that it has been a success, and we're operating it daily.
How much of remote control over these pump stations do you have?
Pretty good. I mean, full remote control. We operator can log on. Obviously, they get full alarms of any issues, but they can log on. They can run a pump in hand, control the variable frequency drives. We could also run it in auto with level set points. So we virtually can do whatever we want.
Okay, so it's not required that you send people to the pump stations all the time to
no, not all,
keep
and
things going. Great.
the only reason we would do that, if there's an issue like an alarm that we have to report there, or the other one is if there was a power outage, and if we had to mess with something with the generator or something. Other than that,
okay. And all three stations are the same capability in terms of number of pumps, the flow rates.
They all have the same.
Ignoring the deficiency in pipes.
Correct. So they all have the same amount of pumps. They each have 3. And they're all, as again, through testing known, run 1 or 2. We don't need to run 3 to get the capacity that we need. But they do have different capacities. West Lilac has a larger flow capacity. Just off memory, I believe it's 12 CFS, and then Rancho Amigos 7 CFS, and the other one's 5. So they are.
Is that due to the difference in their construction or the
pipes.
flow pipes in and out?
Yes, the effluent pipes and the suction pipes that are smaller.
So they really are the same design.
Basically, yeah.
Stations.
Smaller pumps. Yep. Any other questions?
Nice update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good work. You guys probably put a lot of hours in getting all that done during the commissioning process.
Everybody did.
Startup and commissioning is always long hours, high pressure, fair amount of anxiety.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for your service.
I also just wanted to say congratulations on
Oh.
that. I know how difficult it is with startup as well, but to see no water quality issues and not have any problems with the pump stations, I think is fantastic. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please pass along.
Well done, yeah.
We were
Good job.
incredibly surprised. So we were monitoring customer service emails. We had meter readers looped in on what was going on. So any calls that would come in, we could capture them really quickly and figure out, is it related to what we're doing? And we had team messaging and text messaging going with everybody. We're on the radios, and it was it was unexpected because I fully expected there's going to be something happening. And
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't. And it was a lot of people putting a lot of long hours in to get work done. And I reported to Jake probably a full week before we officially detached and said, we're good to go on these stations and we're going to start running them all now.
He said he was like the gladiator. Remember he does, and then he gave me that. I would say, and Robert was filling me in and Steve, as we were kind of leading up into these startups. Hey, this is kind of how we're going to do it. We're going to run one pump here, and then we're going to run them together. And, it was kind of a 10,000-foot look, but I took an active interest. I was out at the pump stations on multiple days. Just, it helps me learn the system, to be quite honest. But I'll tell you this, operationally, it was really impressive. The coordination that went on, the teamwork surrounding it, because like Robert and Steve were saying, I mean, you had people out in the field monitoring suction pressure, discharge pressure within the system, looking out for issues. And again, 20 years of experience brings you this, where you kind of know where the hot spots are and where you might see issues. And so having people stationed there, and the traffic, the communication traffic that was going on, and just kind of how it was sequenced day to day. And I could follow it, and I'm going, okay, I see what they're doing now. I see what they're doing now. Oh, we got one last test to run, and, and they've got a few things they got to, I'm just saying, from my perspective, to see an operations group do something like that, it was really, really impressive, and they did it really fast. And without me, I didn't have to pound the table at all. It was just, they knew what had to get done, and they got it done in a really, really efficient way. So yeah, a lot of kudos to staff.
I felt bad. Like he said, he showed up on one. We're out there all day, and he showed up to check things out. I'm like, oh, good. You going to buy pizza? Jokingly. And then he's like, yeah, what do you want? And I'm buying pizza, everybody. So I felt bad. I'm like, oh, sorry.
Don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Okay, well, we'll move from that success to another success in the operations department. And that would be item 12, Gopher Canyon Road Pipeline Replacement Project Update.
I'm going to defer to Issa, who is the man on the scene every
right.
single day out there.
All right, Issa. Give it to us.
All right. Oh, this one? Yellow. What if I stand over here? Is that better?
There we go.
Yep.
All right, cool. Hi, my name is Issa Lagunas. I'm the construction and meter supervisor here at Rainbow. Just going to give you guys an update on our Gopher Canyon emergency pipeline project. If you guys remember, back in, I believe it was late July, we had a main break on Gopher Canyon. It was a Friday. We responded, made a repair. But as you can see, the pipe was in very poor condition, and we came to you all in early August and suggested, what if we replace this section of 375 or so feet of pipe? Two benefits, multiple benefits. One is we're already going to pay for the paving because of this main break, and it undermined the road, right? And now we no longer have to worry about this section of pipe breaking again. Second benefit is upsizing it from 8-inch to 12-inch. As you remember, or maybe you guys remember, there's this section of 8-inch pipe where it's 12 on one side, 12 on the other side, but in between it was 8-inch, right? Like, so, two major benefits. And we were already going to go in and pay for the paving, which was the biggest expense. On late August, 8/27, the board approved approximately 400 or so K for us to go in and replace this section of pipe and also complete the paving on Gopher Canyon. We ordered the fittings shortly after, and the pipe and all the fittings arrived in late September. So it was about a month from once the board said, okay, go ahead, go for it. We order the stuff. About a month later, all of our pipe arrived. You can see the picture on the right. Our guys are prepping the pipe. It's on the side of the road on Gopher Canyon. We're staging it and we were welding handholds. That's so our guys can get in there and mud the pipe from the inside. On September 30th, we started installing the pipe. As I mentioned, we upsized it from 8-inch to 12-inch CMLNC pipe, steel, coated by concrete outside and on the inside. It took us 4 days to install 350 feet. And then once that pipe is installed, it is capped on each end, and then we proceed to pipe testing. The pipe testing consists of a pressure test. So we pump it up, get it up to a high pressure, let it sit for 4 or 6 hours, make sure that the pressure is not dropping. If it's dropping, then we know we have a leak. If it holds steady, then we know there's no leaks. High chlorine, so we sterilize, disinfect the pipe, flush out that high chlorine, and then we take a bacteriological sample. Make sure that there's no bacteria in the pipe before that pipe goes live and gets connected to the live system. It took us 2 working days to connect the east side of the pipe. You can see here we were about 12 feet to the bottom of our excavation. 9.5, 10 feet to the top of the pipe of the existing pipe on Gopher Canyon. We had to angle upwards. That was day 1. Day 2, you could see we angle up and connect to our existing pipe. So this is our new pipe there. That's our connection diving down. That's the connection going down. So that's day 1 of that tie-in. This is day 2. On late October, we tied in the west side. You can see 2 of our welders are in the hole. They're connecting. This is there's actually a valve on this side, and this is the pipe that is going towards the new development, Bonsall Oaks, or gosh, what's the name of it now? I can't remember. But the Havens. Thank you. Paving, we went out and we reached out to different paving contractors to get the cost for paving. It looks like it's going to be a lot less than I shared with you guys before. I don't want to give you guys exact numbers because what if that stuff changes? I don't want to spoil the happy ending. I'm hoping that everything goes through as I'm expecting, and we're able to report that this project comes in way below budget than the 400,000. So paving is coming soon. That's what it looks like today. It's cold mix. We have signs out that warn the cars that are driving towards it, just not to hit it at that high of a speed. This is an aerial shot. You can see Vista Valley to the bottom of the screen, the new development towards the top. Towards the left would be Calavi, towards Gopher Canyon heading to the east.
It's a great par 5. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
I've played that whole of it.
This is a good shot of that section of pipe that was replaced. So you could see that 374 feet-ish kind of to the middle left of the screen. And towards the top left-hand corner, you see that's where the Dentro de Lomas pump station is at. And where Steve was just explaining about how that pump station is capable of moving water through that. I just kind of drew that hashed or that, that dashed line heading over towards Gopher Tank. And I think it's because of this project, and I'm thankful for your guys' support in supporting us with the board, because this section of pipe allows us to do that. I don't think it would be possible to move that water from Dentro Pump Station through this section of pipe to Gopher Tank if it wasn't for replacing this pipe. That's all I got. Any questions?
Robert, many years ago, there was a project that I thought was going to be like a couple miles of pipeline along Gopher Canyon.
Yep.
This is part of that, right?
No, this
Nope.
was not part of the PUP project. So the PUP projects essentially started east of Dentro de Lomas on Gopher Canyon, and it included connecting. There's a section on Gopher Canyon where we don't, or right around Twin Oaks, where we don't have any water line on Gopher Canyon, but the water line is behind the homes on the north side of Gopher Canyon. So we're going to abandon that, pull it out in the street, connect, and then rerun everybody's services. They were also going to do Nella Lane. It's a little cul-de-sac. That's actually already been done. So that was completed, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago. So there was a bunch of little projects in that area, but this had nothing to do with that. So essentially, we weren't planning on doing anything west of Dentro de Lomas. Additionally, on the cost, so we did some cost forecasting on this when we did the initial board report. Once we're done with the paving, we'll report back to E&O and or the board with those final costs, trying to show everybody where we landed, how good was our estimate on our timing, you know, how many days that it took us to do, and what our true costs were versus what we anticipated they would be. So it's a good self-check. But it initially looking at things, like we're going to be under that number. So it worked out really good. The timing on getting that 8-inch abandoned, and what Isa's saying is if we hadn't replaced that 8-inch, taken it out and upsized it to 12, we may not have been able to use the Dentro pump station to pump to Gopher. The timing of his guys getting that done, literally the next day we were starting up Dentro and pushing it up to Gopher. Like it was just and I called him.
To happen.
I called him on a Monday. I'm like, I need you to get this done like now. And so then we have that conversation back and forth, and luckily everything just kind of dropped into place. And we weren't anticipating doing it on that Thursday. I think we were going to wait till the following week on Tuesday, and timesheets were doing stuff like that. So, but it worked out for the best.
Is this all 12?
That's how it goes.
Yeah, yes,
Way from the pump station to Gopher.
correct. 16 at the top.
Yeah, I want to say 16 up to there, then there's one.
Yes.
Okay.
So we had that little weird bottleneck of 8-inch pipe right there.
Yeah.
So it no longer exists.
You gotta ask yourself, how in the world did that ever happen to begin with? You gotta-
It's in the yard.
Yeah. So also keep in mind, all those pictures he showed were the construction guys doing the welding and installing the pipe. That's not common for water districts to do that as much as it maybe used to be in the past. So when you see a whole construction crew out there doing that level of work, normally they'll dig it out and get the pipe ready and hire welders to come in and do that. And that pipe, the pressure is running 280, maybe 270 out there,
Mhm.
right? So if they're not good at what they're doing, it's going to come to light very quickly.
So it's what type of pipe then?
Cement coated steel. Yeah. And every joint's welded. So
Now, when we recommended to the board and the board acted to approve this emergency project, did we make a change to the budget?
We added it to the list of projects to as for potential for financing under the $10 million US bank loan. What we had talked about was at mid-year budget time, we would kind of factor in everything we had
Right.
added and
correct.
subtracted and kind of take a look at our CIP budget and see where we're at and if we needed to.
I'm
make
just
any-
salivating a little bit because of the thought that this project is going to come in under budget most likely, unless there's some hidden costs that we hadn't thought about, but sounds like it. And so just salivating a little bit at another wad of money that we can argue about what to do with, that we did not have to do with it what we thought we would. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have this money to begin with, but okay.
It's debt. So it's issues. It's much
But
debt.
it won't eat up it won't eat up as much as we thought it might. And it's really comes down to the paving. These guys were really efficient, but the bulk of the cost was in the paving. And I think from what the county has given us and what we're looking at as far as the scope, it's been condensed a little bit. So I think that's where we're going to see some savings.
Good. Savings are always good.
Yep.
Yes.
Wasn't this gonna be like $250,000 for the paving? Does that
originally.
sound right?
I think we had put about 400,000 in. And so, yeah, just for the paving, it was the bulk of the cost. I think we said there was a budget, or we were looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 600,000. And I think 450 was the paving. Yeah. So
Isn't a small amount maybe for the larger pipe size or something?
Yeah, we bought the pipe. I think it was, but there's about 50, 60,000 in material.
Yeah.
We'd budgeted what, 40, 50 in labor. Some other miscellaneous. So yeah, paled in comparison to the pipe, the paving though. Yeah,
Paving's always the most expensive.
It's a nice success story.
it is.
Nice job Okay, on well, getting
It done when Robert needed it done.
Thank you for that update. Wonderful success story. That gets us to item 13, comments and requests. Item 13A is the GM. Jake, that's you. Got any comments?
I think we've done enough today. Handled a lot of business. I will say, just to give you guys a heads up on kind of what is coming up. You know a lot of it. We dealt with a lot of that today, but we will be talking about the financing with budget and finance and the board. At the board meeting, we'll also be talking through a water service agreement with Eastern. So really, we need to do that this month. And really, it goes back to actually the original MOU terms that we had with them, where basically they're wholesaling us water at the Met cost plus $11 administrative charge. That's the gist of the water services agreement, but that'll be in front of the board on November 19th. And then Eastern is taking that up on November 20th. I will let you know just about 10 minutes ago, I apologize for being on my phone, but I was waiting for that certificate of completion from LAFCO to actually come through because everybody is waiting for it. And I just got it. So that got forwarded onto the Water Authority and Eastern because they're doing a report to their board tomorrow. So hey, can we have some proof that it actually happened? And so that actually just came through. So it's been, to be quite honest, it's been a really busy, year, but the last couple of months in particular, I think for our entire staff, and that goes Carlene's group, as we're preparing press releases and messaging and all these kind of things on all these actions that are happening. But our engineering and operations and finance, Rick's done a tremendous amount of work on really completing all of this, both physically and administratively. It's been a lot of work. And so the staff is, every single one of them has really performed. And at some point we are going to celebrate. I think it was Carlene. She was saying, when are we going to celebrate? I just wanted to take a nap. That's what I told her. But we will celebrate it. It is an achievement. There are some very hard decisions to make, and I don't envy the board either, having to kind of weigh, costs and versus savings and how to allocate these things and what's the priorities and those kind of things. And so as staff, we're going to try to provide as strong of recommendations as possible for board action. And there's going to be a lot coming in November in particular. And then, and then beyond that too, because we'll continue to have to deal with rates and all those kind of things. So anyway, so that's really what's been going on. Appreciate the actions taken today. It helps us kind of wrap up some of these things. And so, yeah, appreciate this committee's willingness to dive in and really kind of see the big picture too. So thank you. And I'll just leave it at that.
Jake, Fallbrook's doing the same thing, or are they up along, or are they still behind us?
No, they detached last January. They didn't have to do anything.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have to do anything. There was no facilities to construct. They were already fully tied into the connections. It was much more complicated for Rainbow than it was for Fallbrook. And so, yeah, basically as soon as they had the paperwork done, that was it for them.
So just to note from our press release, we're going to be the front page on the Village News this week, Thursday.
Okay, 13B, Engineering and CIP Program Manager comments. Chad, you got anything for us?
I think we've talked about everything for today's agenda.
Okay. 13C, Operation Manager's comments. Robert?
So you saw me banging away on my computer while everybody's talking, and I'm a huge multitasker, but collating a lot of information that was coming in. So the National Weather Service has issued a fire weather watch starting at, it started around 12:40 today. And they're anticipating it's going to end either Thursday night or Friday morning. Santa Ana's are forecast to come in around early morning tomorrow and last, same thing, Thursday night, early Friday morning. SDG&E has activated their emergency operations center to level 3. I also was notified that circuit 217, so they identify our facilities by circuit numbers, which is McGee pump station and McGee tank is most likely going to be affected by the public safety power shutoff starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. We do have generator backup at that pump station, and we've already pre-filled that tank. I think we've got about 20 feet in that tank, and there's not a lot of use out there.
Where is McGee? Just,
What's that?
where is that?
So that's off of Rancho Heights, off of Palo Temecula Road. So we're really bumping up close to Palomar Mountain out there. It's our farthest easterly, like northeasterly site, way out there.
It's way out there.
We received our initial notification Sunday night for the public safety power shutoff. And we have protocols when we get that notification to fill our tanks up to 75% and hold them in a range of 50 to 75. Normally it's at the operator's discretion and their goal is to keep the water fresh. So sometimes the tanks will run down to 3 feet and then they'll fill it back up. And then the chlorine residual that we were talking about refreshes the tank. In these condition yellow, we say, no, you can't go below 50% on the tanks. While we were talking here, I just notified the supervisor, said we're going to set condition red by tomorrow morning. So that means we're going to start pushing the tanks up to 75 to 100% and hold.
And not cycle them.
And not cycle them. So they'll cycle them in that little range, and it does start to degrade water quality because we're not doing the deep cycle. So as soon as the event is over, we've got to let that water go back into the system as soon as possible. And it's always like this, so it works out. So we're on a heightened state of readiness. Operations staff will have their radios on. We do extra things, make sure the trucks are fueled up before you go home at night. Pay attention to your phone. There's a whole bunch of stuff we do. So we'll be on Johnny on the spot in case something happens. If not, but nothing happens, they are saying there may be some more Santa Ana's next week. So we'll see how
Time of year?
Yeah, it's that time of the year. We'll see how it goes. The winds are saying 30 to 40 miles an hour for our area, which isn't significant. The issues that we've had a couple fires in our service area already. And when it's really hot and there's no wind, it's insignificant. It's not a big deal necessarily. It's the winds that will do exactly what happened to Lilac, catch those embers and shoot them, half a mile down and start more fires. The other issue that I worry about is, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, is if we have a lot of fires in the county and resources, especially air assets, are mobilized on other fires, then we start having action in our area. There's not enough resources to go around, right? And it's kind of like war. Air assets really help a lot and can do a lot more good faster than ground assets. So I always watch what else is going on in the rest of the county or in Riverside where assets can be reallocated. So we're watching all kinds of different stuff that's going on. But we've gone through this before and they don't turn the power off. The winds are fine and there's no fire. So who knows? We'll see how it goes.
That's okay.
We'll keep everybody updated.
I'm on my 4th notice as a homeowner for an upcoming planned power outage. And so far the power has never been turned off. And I've had 4 of them in the last 3 months.
Does that bother you?
Huh?
Does that bother you?
No.
Because I had the same thing at my house,
I mean,
and I prepped for it because it was going to be a long outage. I was really upset when it didn't go out.
I'm fine with it. It just says to me, it confirms what I've known, that I'm not sure SDG&E's planning operation is 100% got feet on the ground.
Yeah.
That's
Good,
all.
good thing we have Robert.
Or they over notify. That was what I told my
Yeah,
wife. They
could
just
be.
over
Could be.
notify.
Maybe.
Just to be sure that they don't get a complaint.
Yeah.
So I get that. Okay, 13D, committee member comments. Any committee members have any comments that they would like to make? We'll start with you, Mig, you got anything?
No, just thank you and great job to all the staff for everything that's been done over the past year to get us where we are. It
Thank you,
was a
Mick.
long haul trying to get it to a vote, and it's good to see it come to fruition. So thank you very much.
All right, you bet. Robert, got anything?
Well, your last comment, it could be worse. I spent from mid-June to mid-September with a jackhammer 200 feet from my house trying to drill a hole for a new power pole. They couldn't get through the rock, solid rock. They tried everything. They finally got it done, finally put the power pole in. But every morning, that's all.
Carrie, you got anything?
Just reiterating Meg's comments, thanking the staff. Great job.
Steve?
Yeah, the close the loop follow-up like that, what you guys are doing is great. Keep doing.
Thank you.
And I echo that, but it's just wonderful to hear you guys racking up the success stories out there. Keep it up, keep it up. And on a personal note, I'm gonna be out of town starting Tuesday, November 19th, and returning in the evening of Tuesday, November 26th. So I will not be able to represent this committee at the board meeting on the 24th or 5th, whatever that is.
On the 19th.
Yeah, what? The
On the
19th, yeah, the 19th. So Steve, if you are available, you can communicate with Therese and Jake about whether you would be willing to give the Engineering and Operations Committee report at the board meeting.
Yeah, I'll need to look at calendar. I don't, yeah.
Would you do that and let them know? They, in the past, they have also, the staff have also used the secondary fallback option, which is that one of the members of the staff would pinch hit for us. So, you know, the world is not going to collapse if you personally don't make the report, but it would be nice if a ratepayer appeared before the board. That's all. Fair enough?
Yeah. Okay. Therese, can we talk offline about dates and times? Thank you.
Okay, board action updates. That's item number 14.
Board action updates.
This is where, and we can forego at this time, but this is typically the place where if this committee has made a recommendation to the board at a prior, that did the board in fact
Got it.
take our recommendation or not?
Yeah, and that was me racking my brain for
Yeah,
what
yeah.
actually happened. There were two items. We had the notice of completion for the SCADA project and the SDG&E easement that were both approved by the board.
That's
and
correct.
As recommended by the committee.
That's correct. Anybody have anything on the as needed report? Did I see any yellow, Chad?
There are two that were issued in October. On-call construction management with Valley CM, extending that contract, and right-of-way engineering performing some on-call land surveying.
Got it. Both very small. Well, I don't know, the surveying one is 10,000, so that's a pretty significant piece of work, right?
Yeah, that's several days in the field, plotting in the office and providing the exhibits. That's for some proposed work we're doing with FPUD on a proposed future interconnect.
And I can't read very well, but it looks to me like we triggered $81,000 in construction inspection. Is that right?
With Valley CM?
Yep.
Correct. And that is 100% offset to the projects and developments that they work on. That does not hit our operating budget.
I get that. I keep seeing those numbers and I keep thinking at some point, you know, we might want to hire a person, but
well, this is covering Ryan on his PTO, and while he was full-time on the pump station project, Ryan is already in transition to go back to covering all this, and then this will go down to only covering his PTO.
Thank you. Okay, and then suggested agenda items for the next meeting.
I have one very unfortunate one. At least from my perspective.
Yep.
Maybe not from Rick's. We will need to seat a new alternate at the next meeting or the following meeting. Mr. Aragon has accepted a position at Western Municipal Water District as their Assistant General Manager. And will be leaving us in December, and we are very upset, but we are very excited for him. It's actually a huge move. Obviously a big Met Water Agency, a big position, and yeah, close to his home and all kinds of good stuff.
A new alternate is the least of our concern. What about a new CFO? What the hell? I mean, what the heck?
Well,
Yes.
hey, congratulations, Rick. That's outstanding. I mean, it says that we do a good job of picking people, for one. I think one other thing that I'll tell you, Jake, is when I came on the board, and there were a lot of people with not a lot of experience at the time. I think one of the things that I explained to them was on the previous board I sat on in Running Springs, in our mission statement, well, I guess not mission statement, but objectives, we built in and recognized that we were a small district and that we were going to be a stepping stone for people to advance to greater things. Okay. And, it just goes with the territory. And so, that's what we do. Find great people and help them advance, knowing that when the time comes and we need some people, we'll be able to reach out to them. They'll think of us, and they might have somebody that needs to advance, and they'll be coming our way. So again, congratulations, Rick.
It's a huge promotion. That's great.
Yeah,
Big deal.
I'll just
Very
say
big deal.
from our perspective, and he'll probably hear me say this a few times, but bringing Rick on, I was hoping he would stay longer, to be quite honest, and he knows that. But I think having him this year was so critical for what we had to do on the financial side, and very thankful for previous relationship that kind of brought I was hoping it was my secret that I had the best CFO in the state. It didn't last as long as I would have hoped. But I do. I think the things that we accomplished this year, having him here was invaluable to the district, and I think we're on a good course because of it. So,
Yeah, Rick, we've seen financial reports from you. I haven't seen in the 5 years I've been here. But you did different work than all your predecessors, and good work for our visibility.
Miss you.
Yep.
Gonna miss you. Okay, I believe, do we have any other suggested items for the next meeting? I don't think we had. The board is going to decide about the pump station budget increase. The board is going to decide what to do with attachment surplus distribution. And the board is gonna potentially approve the tank maintenance contract if you guys get that squared away. And we had 2 updates, and so it sounds to me like we'll have a pretty clean slate for next meeting. So staff is always invited to put topics up for us to deal with. And
We might have an update on Gopher if the paving gets done by then. That's a big if. We're also looking at, we've been doing an odor control study for the wastewater system. So using different companies and their proprietary chemicals to knock down the odor. And we've finalized that study, so we may have that complete.
will that result in some kind of a action by the district, as in acquiring something or selecting something?
It would be, it's a dollar amount for the chemicals, let's say over a year,
Okay,
right? Letting the board know this is, I guess we'd be asking for their approval to procure it. Yeah.
all right.
So-
Okay, well, then if there's nothing else, we'll just call this thing adjourned, right? QED, quit and eat dinner. Okay,
Thank you.
Rick?
Get your butt at work.
Right now, Rick.
Thanks a lot, all. Good night.
Bye, Meg.
See you, Meg.